Chapter 1588. Cutting off my food supply is the same as killing me. Come, watch how I chop off your heads and kick them like a chamber pot. On the city tower, more and more soldiers expressed their dissatisfaction. In an instant, the crowd was enraged and the soldiers' morale rose by a few steps. Looking at this scene, Yang San chuckled and immediately said, "Everyone, don't be anxious. Fight well. There will be supper delivered in the middle of the night. However, everyone must defend and not let the enemy attack. Otherwise, not only will there be no food to eat, even the safety of your family in the city will not be guaranteed." Hearing that there would be supper at night, many soldiers immediately felt their bodies were filled with energy. One by one, they shouted, "Don't worry, with us here, we will defend our home. With this meal, our lives will be sold to the 5-star army. Yes, we will definitely defend the city with our lives and not let the 3 provincial armies take a step forward. Defend Yunnan Manor with our lives and kill all the enemies. Defend Yunnan Manor and kill all the enemies." On the city tower, the morale of the soldiers was even higher. Under such circumstances, the 3 provincial armies launched a siege. One could imagine what the outcome would be. In the following process of the charge, the soldiers of the 3 provinces truly experienced what it meant to change. It felt as if their opponent had suddenly changed. After countless of their comrades had died in battle, Yunnan Manor still stood in front of them without any signs of wavering. After a night of fierce battle, the 3 provincial armies showed a trace of fatigue. Originally, they thought that after their 80,000-strong army arrived at Yunnan Manor, they would be able to easily take down the city. After all, the news said that Yang Qindong only brought 500 black cavalry with him. Even if they had enviable firearms in their hands, this small number of people was only enough for them to protect themselves. Who would have thought that after fighting until now, not only had they not taken down Yunnan Manor, they had not even seen the person in charge. Their opponents were just some surrendered soldiers who had no choice but to, in addition to some ordinary citizens in the city, and the older ones. This kind of blow really made Rajiv and the others a little disappointed. They even began to doubt their own fighting strength. What's going on? How is it that Yang Qindong is able to unleash such powerful combat prowess? General Luo Guan asked in the main tent with a puzzled expression. Since it wasn't that his combat power wasn't good enough, then he could just find another reason to blame it all on Yang Qindong's command. This was a very good choice. No one knew how to answer this question. The morale of the people in the tent began to plummet. In fact, things were not as bad as they had imagined. As the defenders of the city, they had also paid a heavy price. After an afternoon and a night of intensive attacks, more than 10,000 surrendered soldiers were killed or injured. The civilians were even worse off. The number of casualties reached 20,000. This was the difference between untrained and trained. Those who had been trained would naturally be able to borrow strength and cooperate with each other. Those who had not been trained would only rely on their brute strength. If it weren't for Lang Feng's occasional attacks on the city walls, the city might not have been able to defend itself. Of course, this had a lot to do with the short amount of time they had to defend the city. Yang Qindong had promised everyone that he would only defend the city for 1 day and 1 night. Once the reinforcements arrived, they wouldn't have to risk their lives anymore. It was because of this hope that everyone could continue to persevere. Even though many of the civilians were still vomiting after seeing the blood, they endured it when they thought about how they would be able to return home with their silver. On the other hand, if there wasn't a time limit, their hearts would have been in chaos. Rajiv and the others didn't know this. They understood that the city was very difficult to attack, and the 5-star army's reinforcements were about to arrive. They had reached a point where they had to make a decision. They could either continue to attack the city and charge without caring about their losses. Or they could take advantage of the fact that the 5-star army's reinforcements hadn't arrived and immediately retreat as far away as possible to preserve their limited strength. As for what to do, the generals looked at each other and didn't make a final decision. Report. Just when everyone didn't know what to do, a messenger entered the main tent. Report, a young man who claims to be Mu Tsong is outside the tent. He says he has an important matter to discuss with all of you. Mutsong, the eldest son of Shiping King Mubin. Luo Guan and Wu Yingtu looked at each other. Others didn't know, but they knew this person's identity. Next, Luo Guan explained Mutsong's identity to Rajiv and the others. After hearing that this person had Shiping King's background, hope reappeared in Rajiv's eyes. Quickly, invite him in. At this time, Mutsong suddenly appeared outside the tent. Even if one thought with their toes, it was obvious why he was here. In the past, Shiping King was also a potential enemy of the three provincial kings. If this person dared to appear, he would definitely be captured alive. But now that there was a powerful person like Bugnam of Gojoseon, infighting was impossible. They should be thinking about how to unite. Under the guidance of the messenger, the extraordinary Mutsong walked into the main tent. As a minister and general of the Ming dynasty, the great-grandson of Qian Ning King Muing, the grandson of King Ding Yuan Mucheng, and the son of Duke Qian Mubin, as well as the future third-generation Duke Qian, he had a strong noble aura. Just by walking in, his extraordinary aura was revealed. Especially the smile on his face, it gave people a feeling like a spring breeze. In fact, after the ministers of the Ming dynasty, there were very few idiots, especially those who were groomed by big families to inherit the mantle. They had to undergo all kinds of training from a very young age. This was also the reason why the nobles could last for hundreds of years. The so-called existence was reasonable. The nobles were able to survive under the constant replacement of the ministers and the constant change of the emperor. They also had to put in quite a bit of effort behind the scenes. Mutsong, who had been trained as a successor since he was young, had been learning skills since he was 3 years old. Now, although he was only 17 years old, the aura around him was already not something normal people could compare to. After entering the tent, Mutsong first inspected everyone before cupping his hands in greeting. When he greeted Ravji and the others one by one, he called out everyone's names. Without being introduced, he could clearly recognize everyone. This was enough to prove his skills and also showed that Mutsong had done quite a bit of work in secret. Like this, Mutsong's first impression of him was quite good. Rafi spoke up and gave them a seat. The 6 of them sat down together. After Mutsong sat down, Rafi looked at Luo Guan. The only Han general asked, "But I wonder why young Master Mu is here?" This was clearly a consultant who knew what was going on, but no one had any doubts about this statement. Even if everyone had guessed Mutsong's intentions, they couldn't just say, "What, are you here to help us?" "That's great, we're very grateful. Please make your move quickly. Just tell us what you need and we'll agree to it." How could Mutsong not sense that Luo Guan was probing? He immediately smiled and said, "Generals, this young master is here on my father's orders to assist you in taking down Yunnan Manor." Everyone couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief when their intentions were revealed. Even if they had guessed it, it had a completely different meaning when it came from Mutsong's mouth. But what does His Highness King Shiping want to do? This time, Rafi took the initiative to ask before Luo Guan could speak. It was clear that this person was indeed anxious. Seeing Rafi's hopeful eyes, Mutsong chuckled. Then, he opened his folding fan and said with grace, "Generals, the current situation is very critical. The 5-star army's reinforcements are about to arrive. The earliest wave might appear outside the battlefield in a few hours. In other words, there isn't much time left. If we still can't take down Yunnan Manor, have you considered the following situation?" "Situation? What situation?" Rafi asked with an unsightly expression. Seeing that the other party didn't want to face this question, Mutsong chuckled and said, "Generals, Bugnam of Gojoseon has already arrived at Yunnan Manor. The next step is to solve the problem of the 3 provinces. Now that the 3 provincial kings are still alive, it means that Bugnam of Gojoseon has no opponents here. Once the main force of the 5-star army arrives, with his personality, how could he tolerate the existence of generals here? I'm afraid a large-scale cleanup operation will be imperative at that time, right?" Everyone's expression sank. This was exactly what they were worried about. If they didn't consider this problem, they would have already retreated. Why would they be stuck in a dilemma here? Since no one objected, Mu Tsong continued, now that Bangla has been destroyed by Bugnam of Gojoseon and the 3 provincial kings are missing, everyone has become rootless duckweeds. If we don't think of a way to join a new faction, we can't think of any other outcome other than being destroyed. Oh, right. You don't have to think about where you can't go in the world. The truth is that other than Nanming, the surrounding areas have been occupied by the 5-star army. Even if you want to go, you don't have a direction. Rajiv's and the others' faces turned uglier and uglier as they listened to Lin Yun's words. Faced with this kind of humiliating words, they really wanted to object. However, they helplessly found that what Mu Tsong said was right. Even if they wanted to refute, they didn't know what to say. Everyone's silence was enough to explain the problem. Mu Tsong knew that the time had come, so he opened his mouth again and tried to recruit. Generals, there are only 2 paths in front of you now. First, immediately surrender to Bugnam of Gojoseon and you might be able to keep your life. But forget about glory and wealth. To be honest, with your actions and the fact that you attacked the city, it's already good enough that you can keep your life. As for the second path, it's to join my banner. As long as you're willing to join, you'll be a general of Nanming. My father can guarantee your safety and your current position. After all, no matter how powerful Bugnam of Gojoseon is, he's still a subject of the Great Ming. How can a subject provoke his master? Chapter 1589. The matter was finally made clear. Mu Tsong didn't seem to be in a hurry for everyone to express their stance. Instead, he put away his folding fan and slowly sipped on the tea on the table. However, from time to time, his eyes would vaguely sweep across the crowd, indicating that his heart was not calm at all. Coming as a lobbyist this time was also a risk. No one knew what Loveji and the others were thinking. What if they were prepared to surrender to Yang Chendong? Then wouldn't he be walking right into a trap and be captured to take credit? Although the possibility of this was very low, it was still possible. Therefore, Shiping King Mubin didn't agree to Mu Tsong coming as a lobbyist until Mu Tsong said it was a critical moment of survival. Yunnan Manor was where the Mu family had lived for generations. Without this place, they would have no roots, no weight, and no influence in the Southern Ming Empire. For the Mu family's future, and to thank the Great Ming Empire for their kindness to their ancestors, this risk was worth taking. That was why Mu Tsong appeared here. That was why he said those words. But in reality, his little heart was pounding rapidly. He was even prepared to die for a noble cause. Even if he died, he couldn't fall into Yang Chendong's hands and let Bugnam of Gojoseon use him to threaten his royal father. Mu Tsong carefully observed everyone. At this moment, everyone was seriously considering Mu Tsong's words. As he said, they really didn't have any other choice now. Disregarding everything else, it was indeed as the other party had said, they had no way out. If they couldn't take down Yunnan Manor and rescue Zhu Huiqiang before the 5-star army's main force arrived, then they really wouldn't have a place to live in the future. Could they rescue Zhu Huiqiang just by taking down Yunnan Manor? Who knew if this person was alive or dead, or had fallen into Yang Chendong's hands? If it was the latter, they probably wouldn't be able to find Zhu Huiqiang even if they took down Yunnan Manor. In that case, what was the point of taking down Yunnan Manor? At the end of the day, they were determined to attack Southern Cloud Manor just to find a boss for themselves. In a place like the Great Ming Dynasty, where everything was particular about status, without Zhu Huihua's protection, their existence was unreasonable and everyone had the right to punish them. This also meant that their existence would not last long. But now, things were different. Mu Tsong was here. They had another choice, which was to become Shiping King's subordinates. That way, they would have a backer, and they would also have a name. Just as Mu Tsong had said, Shiping Wang was from the Southern Ming Dynasty. Yang Chendong was only a king with a different surname from the Great Ming Dynasty. If he dared to attack King Shiping, he would be making an enemy out of the Southern Ming Empire. That would be a great disrespect, and he would lose in terms of innate ability. As for the matter of surrendering, no one even considered it. Their previous actions had already offended the 5-star army. Surrendering to them would only bring shame to themselves. Therefore, there was only one option left, which was to seek refuge with King Shiping. The generals quickly made a decision in their hearts. In their eyes, the reason why they were willing to obey Zhu Huihua's orders was because he was a king personally conferred by the great Ming dynasty. Now that they had a better choice, Zhu Huihua's life and death had nothing to do with them. I'm willing to pledge my loyalty to King Shiping. The first to think it through was Rajiv. He was originally a general of the Binjgrad kingdom. Now that the kingdom was destroyed, he had no other choice. After Rajiv took the lead, Luo Guan, Wu Yingtu, Azad, Huck, and the others also expressed their loyalty to Mu Tsong one by one. All right. Mu Tsong stood up excitedly. After all, he was only a 17-year-old youth. Even if he was shrewd, there was a limit to it. Seeing that he had achieved his goal, of course, he would be excited. Young master, I wonder what King Shiping wants us to do next. It was Rajiv who asked, but his attitude was very humble. It seemed like young master Mu Tsong was the leader in the absence of King Shiping. At this moment, not only Rajiv, but the other generals also looked at Mu Tsong, waiting for his answer. Ahem. After clearing his throat, Mu Tsong raised his head higher and spoke more forcefully, Everyone, thank you for believing in my father. Don't worry. Since everyone has made a wise choice, you will be part of King Shiping's residence in the future. You will also be part of the Southern Ming dynasty. Even if we can't defeat the 5-star army in the future, as long as we withdraw from the battlefield in time, the 5-star army won't dare to do anything to you. Because you have the powerful Great Ming dynasty behind you. Yes, yes. Everyone nodded like chickens pecking at rice. This was the result they wanted. Speaking of this, it had to be said that the Great Ming dynasty was still a colossal existence in everyone's mind. Whether it was territory, army, or economic strength, the Southern Ming dynasty and Baiming were not small countries that could be compared to them. There were even a lot of rumors that the 5-star army was invincible and destroyed countries wherever they went, but they didn't seem to have any conflicts with the Great Ming dynasty. Even though Baiming had caused trouble for the 5-star army several times, they only focused on defense. All of this seemed to indicate that the 5-star army was strong, but they were not a match for the Great Ming dynasty. The reason why the Great Ming dynasty didn't really attack the 5-star army was because they were all Han and had the same ancestry. Secondly, the Great Ming dynasty's national policy was that they wouldn't attack unless they were attacked. The 5-star army respected the Great Ming dynasty, so everyone was at peace with each other. Otherwise, if the Southern Ming dynasty or Baiming really wanted to attack, the 5-star army wouldn't be a match for them. Once this saying spread, it was seen as a golden rule by many people, especially since the 5-star army didn't come out to deny it. It was seen as the truth by many people. Therefore, to be able to join the King of Shiping's army was very tempting for Rajiv and the others. Back to the main topic, after getting Rajiv and the others to surrender, Mu Tsong told them the result of his discussion with his father. Everyone, my father's intention is to take advantage of the fact that we have the advantage of military strength and take down Yunnan Prefecture before the 5-star army's reinforcements arrive. We need to prove to the Southern Ming dynasty that we are strong. Only then can we get more support from the imperial court. At the same time, it's also a warning to Yang Chendong not to provoke us. Otherwise, he won't be able to bear the consequences. Well said. Rajiv and the others immediately cheered when they heard this. They had just joined the King of Shiping's army and urgently needed an opportunity to prove themselves. Taking down Yunnan Prefecture was the best way to prove themselves. With such a simple idea, everyone reached a consensus. This was exactly what Mu Tsong wanted. Under the premise that they had the same goal, the next step was to discuss the next military plan. The siege had to continue. Not only that, they also had to think of a plan to deal with the 5-star army's reinforcements. The generals began to use their talents and discussed. On the tower of Yunnan Prefecture, the 3 provincial armies had stopped attacking for half an hour. In the 3 provincial palaces in the city, Yang Qindong's expression didn't change after he heard Ba Daojiang's report. Sixth young master, do you think they're not going to retreat? Ba Daojiang asked again when he didn't get a response. Obviously, he wanted to learn more. Yang Qindong admired Ba Daojiang very much. This person was very uncouth, but because of this, he was very loyal. Moreover, he had followed Yang Qindong for more than 10 years and had performed well. The Black Cavalry was about to be expanded. When the time came, the position of a captain would be set in stone. Yang Qindong naturally nurtured such a talent. After glancing at Ba Daojiang, Yang Qindong said, whether they escape or not, their ending won't change. Since they're enemies with the 5-star army, they're our enemies. Unless they surrender, they won't be able to escape our pursuit even if they run to the ends of the earth. Magnanimous, Ba Daojiang couldn't help but praise after hearing this. Yang Qindong gave everyone the impression that no matter how big the problem was, he wouldn't care about it and he could solve any problem easily. With such an omnipotent, capable, and invincible leader, what was there to be afraid of? The only thing to be afraid of was that the enemy would be scared and there wouldn't be a big battle to fight. In the face of Ba Daojiang, who was thirsty for knowledge, Yang Qindong certainly wouldn't just say that. He thought for a moment and said, actually, what the 3 provincial armies will do is no longer the young master's concern. What I'm thinking about now is where the king of Shiping went. It's impossible for him not to hear about such a big thing. It's strange that he hasn't done anything yet. As the saying goes, there must be a demon behind this. This is the person we need to guard against. Yang Qindong's words stunned Ba Daojiang. Sixth young master, do you mean that our biggest enemy is the king of Shiping? For now, yes. After all, an enemy who doesn't make a move is the scariest. Once he makes a move and we know his purpose, there's nothing to be afraid of. How about this? Send someone to inform Beta Persei and tell him to be careful. Also, tell Yang San to keep an eye on the city. The Mu family has been living in Yunnan Prefecture for generations. No one knows how strong his hidden forces are here. There's no harm in being on guard. Yes. Ba Daojiang's expression became a lot more serious after hearing this. He had already understood the meaning behind Yang Qindong's words. The most threatening king of Shiping had not made a move until now. It was very likely that he was planning something in the dark. This was what they needed to guard against the most. While everyone's attention was still on the city defense battle, Yang Qindong had already seen the bigger picture. Ba Daojiang felt that he still needed to learn to be vigilant in times of peace. He needed to learn to be vigilant all the time. Chapter 1590. Just as Yang Qindong thought, a group of people were having a gathering in a rather large courtyard in the southern Cloud Manor. The courtyard was filled with people. If one looked carefully, one would see that their waists were bulging and they were all carrying weapons. At this moment, there was no one else other than the 3 great clans in Yunnan who could rise up such a force in the city. The 3 great clans of Yunnan referred to clans that had a certain amount of power and wealth. There were many forces like this in the entire Great Ming Dynasty. As big as the capital city of the Northern Ming Dynasty and the capital city of the Southern Ming Dynasty, such forces existed in small towns. This was what people often called the Shi family group. It could also be called the tyrant. Speaking of aristocratic groups, they were not only in the Great Ming Dynasty, but also in other countries. Yang Qindong's method of dealing with them was very direct. If words had to be used to describe it, it would be 4 words: uprooting them. Yes, uprooting them. No matter what kind of background they had or what kind of backing they had, even their country would be destroyed, so why would they care about a small force like yours? If you know what's good for you, take out 90% of your wealth, and we can spare your lives. However, you can't stay where you were before. You will have to move out like most people. This is also the best way to reduce their influence. On the other hand, if they encountered people who wanted money more than their lives, they would be killed. The money would directly go to Yang Xie's treasury and could be used to fill the treasury, making it much simpler. It was precisely because of this that without the existence of the so-called aristocrats, the security of the land occupied by Xianxia quickly stabilized. After all, there was no one to organize them to resist the Han army, which was equivalent to having no opponents. All this time, Yang Chendong had dealt with the aristocrats of foreign races. He had not directly come into contact with the aristocrats of the Han. South Cloud Manor was the first town that the Yang faction had conquered. Naturally, some of the problems that had been hidden under the surface were exposed. Yunnan Manor was the capital of Yunnan. To be able to be called one of the three great clans, their influence was not something that ordinary small clans could compare to. Usually, they were in a competitive relationship. After all, the market was only so big. The more you did, the less you would get. So usually, they hated each other to death. But now, because they had a common goal, they were united. There was no such thing as an eternal friend in the world, only eternal benefits. The so-called three great clans were the Qin clan, Wang clan, and Li clan. Speaking of which, these three families all had a close relationship with the king of the three provinces, Zhu Huixin. They were either related to him by blood, affection, or direct interests. Let's put it this way. The reason why these three clans were able to grow so big was all thanks to Zhu Huichun's daily care. The reason why these three families were able to grow so big was because they had a very good relationship with the Mu family, who was previously known as the King of Yunnan. Now that Zhu Huichu's whereabouts were unknown, the three families did not know that the three provincial kings had been captured by Yang Chendong. That was why they didn't make a move until they received Wang Mubin's letter. Only then did they have a clear direction. Now, they gathered together for this meeting to discuss how to gain benefits in this chaotic world. Merchants didn't like chaotic times, and so did nobles. Although this represented an opportunity, it also represented killing intent. After all, they could make up for it in the future if they made less money, but if they lost their lives, they would lose everything. However, they only had money and a little power. It was impossible for them to stop the general trend, let alone the powerful 5-star army. Therefore, when chaos came, they could only watch at first. Just as they were thinking about whether they should meet Yang Chendong and sound him out, King Shiping's letter arrived. The three families all received the letter, and the content was almost the same. King Shiping asked them to join forces to create chaos in the city and act as spies for them to counterattack Yunnan Prefecture. The letter also stated that Yang Chendong's daily behavior was quite cruel to the nobles. If the three families did not cooperate, they could only leave 10% of their wealth and get out of Yunnan Prefecture. It was this letter that completely made the three families make a choice, which was to become enemies with Yang Chendong. After all, their roots were in Yunnan Prefecture, and they owned a lot of land and industries here. If they could take away their industries, what about their land? Therefore, once they really left this place, it meant that they would lose a lot. This was absolutely the same as taking away their lives. No one was willing to give up everything, take out the foundation that generations of their family had worked hard for decades or even hundreds of years. If they did that, they would not be able to see their ancestors after death. Since they didn't want to surrender, the only way left was to fight with their lives on the line. Fortunately, the main force of the 5-star army had not yet entered the city, so they still had a chance. Especially with King Shiping outside the city, it seemed that they had a high chance of winning. The three families sat together. The heads of the three families, Qin Ninkang, Wang Shufu, and Li Jiayin, sat facing each other in the innermost secret room in the courtyard. Since the three families had made a decision, the next step was to see how much strength they could contribute. Qin Ninkang was the first to speak. The Qin family can organize a team of 1,000 people. The Wang family can organize a team of 800 people. The Li family can also organize a team of 800 people. Wang Shufu and Li Jiayin also expressed their opinions one after another. For a big family like theirs, it was not difficult to gather such a number of people with guards and some workers. Moreover, the great Ming dynasty did not prohibit weapons from being sold in the market. It only prohibited armor from being sold in the market, so weapons were not a problem for them. With the strength of nearly 3,000 people in hand, the three heads of the big families looked at each other with a faint expression of excitement. They knew that once this matter was completed, they would definitely be great contributors. Their achievements in the future would definitely be greater than now. If they could even capture or even kill Bugnam of Gojoseon alive, it was very likely that they would be heavily rewarded by the imperial court of the Southern Ming dynasty. That's right, the target of the three families was Yang Chendong, which was the original king residence of the three provinces where he was now. At this time, the defense of the king residence of the three provinces could be said to be extremely weak. All the forces that could be used were sent to the city tower to guard the city. This caused the defense of the king residence to be less than 1/10 of the usual. This was the time for them to attack. Under a surprise attack, with the advantage of numbers, it was very likely that they would succeed. If that was the case, not only would the king of Shiping thank them, but the emperor of the Southern Ming dynasty would also thank them. After all, Yang Chendong's existence was a huge threat to everyone. With the soldiers in hand, the next step was to discuss the invasion plan. Based on the three families' understanding of the Southern Cloud Prefecture, they quickly formulated an invasion route to ensure that the army would be placed outside the king residence of the three provinces without attracting any attention and launch a fatal attack. Since there was time, the three heads then went to make arrangements. For example, the distribution of weapons and raising of morale required time. Therefore, they set the time for the attack to be 4 hours later, which was before noon. Yang Chendong was completely unaware of all this. Not only did he not know, but Yang San also did not receive any news. Compared to the three families that had been in the Southern Cloud Prefecture for many years, Yang San's security bureau was considered an outsider. It was not difficult for them to hide some things. At this time, Yang San also received Yang Chendong's instructions. Then, he arranged for scouts to go outside the city. Since the young master said that the king of Shiping was likely to be here, of course, he would go and find out where the king of Shiping was. Yang San was on the move, but at this time, the army of the three provinces outside the city had a bigger military operation, which was to ambush the first reinforcements of the five-star army, which was the troops of Yao Yingjun from Guizhou province. Taking advantage of the fact that they were the closest, Yao Yingjun persuaded Jiang Wuqing to surrender and led 20,000 troops straight to Southern Cloud Prefecture. The vanguard general of this army was Jiang Wuqing. He led 5,000 cavalrymen and rushed to the front line. Since Jiang Wuqing had made the decision to surrender to the five-star army, of course, he wanted to perform well. Therefore, he gathered all the warhorses and formed a team of 5,000 cavalrymen in order to be the first reinforcements to appear outside Southern Cloud Prefecture. In this way, it would be impossible for Yang Chendong not to remember him. They were determined to perform well. The closer they were to Southern Cloud Prefecture, the faster the cavalrymen moved. Gradually, they pulled away from Yao Yingjuan's 15,000 infantrymen and appeared at the place where the Mu family set up an ambush. After Rajiv and the others decided to surrender to the king of Shiping, the army of the three provinces was changed to the Mu family army. In a short period of time, they changed their name again. Originally, they were called the Bengal Army, then the Three Provinces Army, and now they were called the Mu family army. Perhaps it was because the name was changed too frequently that everyone simply did not care. After the name change, Mu Tsong was given the authority to lead the troops. He first arranged for Angela and Miaoing to continue to lead the troops to attack Southern Cloud Prefecture. He asked them to create a commotion to confuse the five-star army. Next, he brought Luo Guan, Azad, and Huck along with their 20,000 soldiers to set up an ambush on the official road from Xujing Prefecture to Southern Cloud Prefecture. This time, Mu Bin had made a good plan. He had only sent out 10,000 soldiers, but he had used righteousness to recruit more than 50,000 helpers. In this battle, no matter if he won or lost, he would not suffer too much loss. He could even take the opportunity to weaken the strength of these surrendered generals. Wasn't that perfect? He only had 10,000 soldiers, while Rajiv and the others had more than 50,000 soldiers. If the other party wanted to rebel against him, wouldn't he have no way to stop them? Now, whether it was a siege or an ambush, it was a good way to weaken the enemy's strength. When Rajiv and the others don't have enough troops, they would trust Zhao Hai more and be more obedient. Chapter 1591. Meanwhile, Mu Tsong had brought 20,000 soldiers to the edge of the forest. The 20,000 soldiers entered the forest beside the official road and drew their bows. They were ready to attack at any time. This was the first battle after joining Shiping. Everyone wanted to perform well to raise their status. The three generals all wanted to perform well. They were all on high alert. Just the scouts were sent 10 miles away just in case. Finally, less than 2 hours after the 20,000 soldiers entered the forest, the scouts at the front reported that the reinforcements from Guizhou had appeared. The 5,000 cavalry led the way. They were very fast and were less than 5 miles away from the forest. But at the same time, there was also bad news. The cavalry was too fast, separating them from the main force behind them. This ambush was destined to not be able to wipe out all of the enemies. Whatever. 5,000 cavalry is not a small force. Let's attack them first. Mu Tsong thought it was a pity, but he quickly made the decision. After all, as a general, the biggest taboo was to constantly plan. It would only cause them to lose all their advantages. Although it was cavalry, Mu Tsong was very confident in fighting 5,000 with 20,000. He was well prepared. Not only him, but his subordinates were also full of confidence. They liked to bully others with numbers because this way, their chances of winning would be higher, and their safety would be more guaranteed. Time slowly passed. The 5,000 cavalry led by Jiang Wuqing did not know there was an ambush here. Originally, they needed to send scouts to scout the forest first. However, they did not have the time now. No one knew what the situation in Yunnan Manor was like. If they could arrive earlier, they would be able to help Bugnam of Gojoseon defeat the enemy. They would be able to contribute sooner. With this thought in mind, Jiang Wuqing hated the fact that the horse he was riding was too slow. How could he do something like stopping? Just like that, the 5,000 cavalrymen entered the forest on both sides of the official road. Mu Tsong's shout came from the forest after all the cavalrymen entered. Then, the whooshing sounds of arrows rang out, accompanied by piles of boulders that suddenly piled up on the official road. The appearance of the boulders instantly cut the 5,000 cavalry into several parts. Except for 100 cavalry who ran at the back and turned to escape in time, the rest, including Jiang Wuqing, were trapped on the official road. They became live targets in the eyes of the 20,000 Mu soldiers. Whoosh 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 whoosh. Under the continuous barrage of arrows, the cavalry who had nowhere to hide were shot one after another and fell to the ground. Jiang Wuqing was better off. Under the protection of his personal guards, he was not hit by any arrows. However, the situation had become very bad. As wave after wave of arrows were shot, the number of personal guards around him was constantly decreasing. "General, let's charge." The guards watched as their comrades were shot and died one by one. They did not even see the enemy's shadow. They could not help but feel anxious. "Charge!" Everyone dismount and charge towards the mountain in the east. Of course, Jiang Wuqing knew that he had fallen into a trap. However, it was too late to say anything now. He could only place all his hopes on the road of countercharge. Want to charge? Prepare the stones. When they come, blast them back. He. In the forest, Mu Tsong was in a good mood. Seeing that he had trapped 5,000 enemy cavalry in one move, he felt like he had the power of the world in his hands. Jiang Wuqing chose to charge. He led the troops towards the dense forest in the east again and again. However, he had to retreat again and again because of the boulders rolling down. Under this repeated process, the number of soldiers around him decreased. There were less than 2,000 people left. "We surrender. Please don't kill us." Finally, some of the cavalry could not hold on any longer. They threw their weapons to the ground and squatted. Many of these people were originally from the three provinces' army. They believed their general Jiang Wuqing and surrendered to the 5-star army. At the end of the day, they didn't have any sense of identity with the 5-star army. Now, in order to survive, they had to surrender. So what? Kill. Don't let any of them go. Kill them all. I want them to know what will happen to the 5-star army if they surrender. Mu Tsong's eyes were filled with hatred as he roared. These cavalry should be the people of Shiping King. However, they first surrendered to the 3 provinces king and now to the 5-star army. He did not have a good impression of these people at all. The arrows did not stop. It was the same even if you dropped your weapon. Soon, hundreds of people were killed by the arrows. This made the kneeling people realize that surrendering was not a wise choice. Let's fight. Pick up your weapons. We have no way out. No one knew who shouted, but the cavalry soldiers who had turned into infantry stood up one by one. At this moment, their eyes were red as they shouted and rushed into the forest with all their might. However, sometimes, you can't risk your life just because you want to. It also depends on whether the opponent gives you the chance. Boulders continued to roll down from the dense forest, accompanied by arrows. Few people who rushed into the forest could return alive. After repeating this twice, the injured Jiang Wuqing realized that there were less than 500 people around him who could fight. 5,000 turned into 500. In less than an hour, he knew that he was going to lose this time. Because he charged too quickly, he did not even have the chance to wait for reinforcements. Soldiers, this general has let everyone down. I will atone for my sins with my death. Come, let's launch the final charge together. Jiang Wuqing held a spear in his hand. His face was ashen. In his heart, he prayed that Yao Yingjun must treat his family well. This was his last hope before his death. Then, he led the soldiers to charge. Battle cries rang out. However, because of the harsh terrain, it did not take long for the cries to stop. Jiang Wuqing fell on the path of the charge. He was hit by 4 arrows. One of the arrows hit his chest and took his life. 5,000 cavalry were left here just like that. This gave Mu Tsong and the others great confidence. The 5-star army is only so-so. Since we can defeat them once, we can defeat them a second time, a third time. Ha ha ha. Mu Tsong shouted as if he was crying with joy. The ambush in the dense forest severely injured Yao Yingjuan's troops who came to help. When he heard the cavalry report that the cavalry had set up an ambush in the dense forest, he was really shocked. He immediately sent out scouts to inquire about the situation. Then, he sent a telegram to Yang Chendong. The general meaning was that the situation had changed. Their reinforcements might not be able to arrive on time. He asked for Bugnam of Gojoseon's understanding. And before this telegram was sent to Yang Chendong, the situation in Yunnan Manor changed. First, Rajiv and Wu Yingtu led more than 30,000 troops to launch a crazy siege. They quickly attracted the attention of the city guards. Under the fierce attack, the West Gate was in danger. Beta Persei had no choice but to send reinforcements from the other 3 gates. There was nothing wrong with this move. But this was exactly what Shiping King Mubin wanted. He already knew that Yang Chendong was good at bewitching people. It was obviously not feasible to take down Yunnan Manor from the front. So, he planned to sneak into the city. As long as he could succeed, the 10,000 troops he led would become the main force. When the time came, it would be no problem to take down the 3 provinces. For this plan, he had already sent a message to the 3 major families in the city. He asked them to send some people to the East Gate and cooperate with him to lead the army into the city. The 3 major families had already bet their lives on Shiping King. Naturally, they would cooperate with him. First, they sent 1,000 people to the vicinity of the prince's mansion in the 3 provinces and secretly controlled all the exits there to prevent Yang Chendong from escaping. Then, more than 1,000 people suddenly appeared after transferring troops from the East Gate to the West Gate. More than 1,000 guards from the 3 major families armed with various weapons still had some fighting power. The most important thing was that the timing of their appearance was too good. They caught the soldiers guarding the east gate by surprise. Only 1,000 people and 500 surrendered troops were responsible for guarding this place. Even Beta Persei did not leave any main force here. He focused all his energy on guarding the west gate. This gave the enemy an opportunity to take advantage of. The battle ended very quickly. The east city gate was breached in less than a quarter of an hour due to the fact that their military strength and combat prowess were inferior to the enemy's. Then, the east gate opened from the inside. The 10,000 Mu family troops outside the city suddenly appeared and jumped in. The east gate was broken, and a large number of Mu family troops rushed into the city. However, they did not rush to the west gate. Instead, their target was the 3 provinces' palaces in the city. When the news was passed from the defeated soldiers to the west gate, Beta Persei was really shocked. Quick, quick, pick 10,000 people to go to the 3 provinces' palaces to protect the young master's safety. Where is Jianghu? I'll leave the battle here to you. You must guard this place no matter what. Beta Persei called Jianghu and ordered him while mobilizing the troops. This was Beta Persei, who had followed Yang Chendong to fight in the north and south, had already developed a certain momentum and did not appear to be flustered. Yes, second brother, don't worry. As long as Jianghu is still here, the west gate will not be lost. Jianghu patted his chest and promised. Then, he watched Beta Persei lead the 10,000 soldiers into the city. The 3 provinces' palaces. Shouts suddenly sounded outside. Dao Xiao and Ba Dao Jiang also quickly appeared in front of Yang Chendong. When they reported the situation outside, they also asked if they needed to retreat to another place. The reason why the Black Cavalry was called elite was not only because they were well-trained and well-equipped, but more importantly because of their fearless spirit. How could such an army be flustered by the sudden appearance of the enemy? Chapter 1592. How's everyone's rest? Yang Chendong asked calmly. Although Mu Bin's move was beyond his expectations, with Datsang in his hands, there was nothing in this world that he was afraid of. The so-called everyone was naturally referring to the Black Cavalry. They had been fighting for days and fired countless shots. Their bodies had reached a point of fatigue, and they had lost a certain amount of combat power the day before. Fortunately, they had not been given any tasks for the day, so they were able to rest well. Although they had not fully recovered, they had at least recovered 70 to 80% of their combat power. It would not be a problem for them to join the battle again. Everyone has rested enough. Please give the order. 6th young master, Dao Xiao and Ba Dao Jiang stood at attention and said confidently. All right, since that's the case, I'll distribute the weapons. Whether or not we can defend this place will depend on the Black Cavalry. Yang Chendong looked at Dao Xiao and Ba Dao Jiang with trust in his eyes. They had not taken a single step back when they were surrounded by Zhu Huiqiu. Now, Shiping King had come in a hurry. What was there to be afraid of? Yang Chendong believed in the 500 Black Cavalry under him, but he believed in himself even more. Yes. Dao Xiao and Ba Dao Jiang saluted again. When they left the palace, they were filled with confidence. The 3 gates of the 3 provincial palaces had already been surrounded by the 3 great families. When they couldn't figure out the situation in the manner, they didn't rashly launch an attack. Instead, they continuously poured the kerosene that they had prepared onto the courtyard walls. Then, they tossed a match into the air, and a raging fire began to burn. The poor palaces of the 3 provinces were about to experience another fire in just one day. Under the fire, the air became hot and dry. Visibility was also affected. The 3 great families took the opportunity to attack. The guards of the 3 great clans had long been prepared for this. Every one of them had a wet blanket draped over their bodies. They kicked open the door that had already lost its frame due to the fire, and loudly shouted as they charged into the courtyard. Da-da-da-da. Da-da-da-da. Concentrated gunshots rang out, and after a sweep, the first few hundred guards who rushed into the courtyard fell into a pool of blood. When the others saw that the situation was not good, they hurriedly retreated. Ba Dao Jiang, who was in charge of the first line of defense, was busy reloading his Type 95 rifle as he spoke with a look of disdain. "You're delusional enough to think that you can take on our black cavalry with such little ability. You really don't know how to write the word death." They had lost nearly half of their men in a single charge. The patriarchs of the three great clans had ugly expressions on their faces. They finally knew why the three provincial kings were defeated by the five-star army in their own territories. With such a tyrannical firearm, Zhu Huiyu's defeat was not a loss. Just as they were lamenting, Wang Mubin of Shiping finally arrived with his troops. After understanding the basic situation, he ordered them to continue attacking without hesitation. Although doing this would result in a huge loss, Mubin had no other choice. If he couldn't quickly take down the three provinces' kings' palaces and capture Yangqindong, he might be surrounded by the five-star army. Mubin gave the order to attack, and at the same time, promised a high position and generous salary. Anyone who could capture Yangqindong alive or find his corpse would be promoted by 3 ranks and rewarded with 10,000 taels of silver. Generous rewards would attract brave men, and there were many people who would sacrifice their lives for money. Not to mention, on the surface, they seemed to have the upper hand. At that moment, the main gate, side gate, and back gate were filled with battle cries. The less than 500 black cavalry needed to defend these 3 gates, and suddenly, the pressure on them increased. The greatest damage of firearms came from their intimidation. When no one was afraid of firearms, they needed to show their killing power. However, the black cavalry had less than 500 men, and they were facing more than 10,000 opponents. The pressure was unimaginable. "Young master, let's break out of the encirclement." Dao Shao appeared in front of Yangqindong for the second time, and his face was filled with anxiety. The 3 provincial kings' residences were too big, and the surrounding walls were already several miles long. It was impossible for the less than 500 black cavalry to defend this place and ensure that no one could break in. For the sake of Yangqindong's safety, breaking out of the encirclement was the best plan. "No need." Yangqindong rejected and waved his hand. This was the 3 provincial kings' residences, and it was no longer the courtyard that he lived in before. If this place was breached, then the people in the city would lose their backbone. If someone instigated the people, whether it was the people defending the city or the surrendered soldiers, they could be used. At that time, it was not impossible for them to turn around and attack. If that was the case, before the main force arrived, they could only retreat from Yunnan Prefecture. In this way, if they wanted to take over this place, they would have to pay a higher price. It would also give others the impression that the 5-star army was only a so-so, and that they could be defeated. That would be the real problem. If they were dealing with other foreign nations, Yangqindong might have chosen to retreat. After all, it was not shameful to run away if you could not win. However, this was the territory of the Han people. If they retreated this time, it would be equivalent to losing the hearts of the people. If they wanted to take over this place, the price they would have to pay would be too high, and the number of people who would have to die would only increase. This was not something that Yangqindong wanted to happen. Therefore, Yangqindong could not retreat at this time. "Dao Shao, you can withdraw a certain amount of the defensive line, give up on the outer courtyard, and just defend the inner courtyard. As for other things, don't worry about them." Yangqindong had already made a decision. Since the black cavalry was having a hard time defending, it was time for him to make a move. Although Dao Shao still wanted to say something, since it was an order from his master, he had no reason to object. He agreed and went to arrange it. After he left, Yangqindong's body flashed and entered the large warehouse. A row of neatly arranged firearms appeared in front of him. What should he use? If there were no black cavalry here, Yangqindong could use the V-10 helicopter to kill everyone. If there were no black cavalry here, Yangqindong could also use a tank with thick armor to kill the enemies. However, it was clear that there were black cavalry here. If he summoned these things, how would he explain it? Most importantly, the current situation was not a matter of life and death. Forget it. The image of Sylvester Stallone in The First Blood flashed across his mind. Yang Qindong chose a Type 95.5 8mm caliber machine gun from the large warehouse. Type 95.5 8mm caliber machine gun. The empty weight of the gun was 3.95 kilograms, 840 millimeters long, and had a range of 600 meters. It was loaded with either 30 bullets or 75 bullets. It was a powerful killing weapon. Yang Qindong took off his coat, put on a bulletproof vest, Kevlar on his head, and military boots on his feet. After his body was covered with bullets, Yang Qindong reappeared in the main hall. "Come on, let's fight." In a flash, Yang Qindong rushed out of the main hall. With his master-level skills and combat power, he nimbly headed for the outer courtyard. Outside the 3 provincial palaces, as the fire burned, reinforcements arrived in batches. The first to arrive were nearly 300 members of the Langia Special Forces. Previously, they had been cooperating with Yang San to investigate the situation in the city. Unfortunately, although their skills were not bad and each of them had unique skills, they were still unfamiliar with the city and had been taken advantage of by the 3 great clans. When they heard that the 3 big families had cooperated with Shiping Wang to take down the West City Gate and headed towards the 3 provinces, the members of the Iron Tiger team roared in anger. This was simply a provocation to the Wolf Fang Special Forces. This was something that they could not tolerate. "Bring your weapons and set out. Kill whoever you see. No one is allowed to live." Iron Tiger was ruthless. Although the opponent this time was also Han, they dared to harm the 6th young master. In their eyes, they were already aliens and could only die. The second batch of reinforcements was the secret agents of the Security Bureau led by Yang San. There were not many of them, only about 300 or so. There were also many non-operational personnel, but when Yang Qindong was in danger, what they had to do was to kill. Whether they could kill or not, they had to kill. The third batch of reinforcements was the 10,000 soldiers led by Beta Persei. However, due to the distance, it would take a lot of time to reach the palace. The sound of gunfire continued in the palace, and the attack continued. Because there were too many places to defend, the number of people was obviously insufficient. The Black Cavalry began to retreat from the outer palace to the inner palace. However, there was another figure who was the opposite of them. He was moving from the inner palace to the outer palace. He was Yang Qindong, who was covered in ammunition. Although the equipment on his body weighed dozens of kilograms, it did not hinder his movements at all. He easily leaped over the 2-meter-high wall with a single run. This was one of the benefits given to him since he transmigrated. He was originally a soldier king in his previous life, so his physical fitness was extremely strong. After the enhancement in this life, he was already invincible. After jumping over 2 walls and brushing past the Black Cavalry, he finally saw the first batch of opponents. This was a group of about 50 guards. "Go to hell." Without any superfluous words, Yang Qindong raised his gun and fired. At this time, someone who could come to the palace of the 3 provinces with a sword in hand and an aggressive look, was not an enemy. He really couldn't imagine who it could be. A magazine of bullets shot out as if they had eyes, not giving any opponent time to react. The sound of gunfire rang out, and their bodies fell to the ground. One after another, the team of 50 people only changed a magazine before they all died. Whoosh! With a flash of his figure, Yang Qindong had already left this place. His massacre had only just begun. In the later years, there were similar scenes in some movies and TV series, but they were often questioned by the so-called experts and beasts. How could a person fight against 10, 100, or even 1,000 people? This was simply unscientific. However, when they saw a hero confronting a regiment or even a division in a Western movie, they often opened their mouths and praised it, saying how realistic it was. Chapter 1593. They really don't know what to say about this kind of completely polar evaluation criteria. Don't they know that in real history, the Battle of Hubudagon? How glorious it was! In the first year of the Jin state, Liao Tianqing's 5th year, 1115, in the Jin, Liao War, the Jin army chased and defeated the main force of the Liao army in the strategic decisive battle at Hebudagan. The Jin army defeated the Liao army with 20,000 troops. The Liao army was defeated and many died. Defeating 700,000 people with 20,000 happened in the era of cold weapons. Yang Qindong was equipped with modern firearms and had the physical condition of a master. Under the endless supply of bullets, it was normal for him to create miracles. One man and one gun strode out of the mansion, and wave after wave of guards died under the muzzle of his gun. After the power of the guards was almost destroyed, the Mu army appeared. They were all wearing the same military uniform and armor, which made them look majestic and awe-inspiring. But it was useless. In the face of Yang Qindong, who was holding a heavy machine, they were only sending themselves to death. With great difficulty, a few people shot arrows at Yang Qindong, but they were also dodged by his agile figure. Occasionally, a bow and arrow pierced Yang Qindong's body, but it was blocked by the bulletproof vest and did not cause the slightest harm. Facing the elite forces of the Mu army, Yang Qindong's gun sounded again, and the enemies fell to the ground one after another. They couldn't imagine until they died that they, who claimed to be elites, couldn't even defeat an opponent with so many people. Of course, it was not that they didn't encounter danger. After all, so many Mu army had rushed into the mansion. But those who came into close contact with Yang Qindong were either killed by his heavy machine gun or thrown aside by his magical steps. Those who finally had a chance to attack were still dodged by Yang Qindong. Along the way, he was like a human-shaped woodcutter. Wherever he went, there were enemy corpses everywhere, and most of them were corpses that were smashed by heavy machine guns. In the excitement of killing, Yang Qindong rushed to wherever there were more people. Ever since Yang Qindong brought Datsang to the Great Ming Dynasty, he had never felt so satisfied with killing as he did this time. Unlike the last time when he dealt with Yes Hen, he was forced to fight. This time, he chose to take the initiative. His goal was to kill people and capture King Shiping. Yes, Yang Qindong's goal was King Shiping. Since this person schemed against him, if he didn't fight back, wouldn't it be a waste of the saying that politeness demands reciprocity? Based on his intuition, King Shiping. Yang Qindong went all the way from the inner courtyard to the outer mansion, and then went straight to the gate of the mansion of the three provinces. At this time, the Mu army's army was all ready. Previously, they had the advantage of numbers. Although they were facing the black cavalry with firearms, due to the limited number of people and the fact that there were too many places to defend, they still found a loophole and killed their way in. However, with Yang Qindong's attack, he turned the situation around with his own strength. As more and more people died in the charge, the Mu army could no longer be seen on the road from the main gate to the mansion of the three provinces. Even so, Yang Qindong was still charging out. He had a feeling that if King Shiping was outside, he must be near the main gate. After all, he was a king. He was always concerned about his reputation. It would be very embarrassing to let such a person leave through the side gate or the back gate. Therefore, Yang Qindong only had one direction to go, and that was the main gate. What's going on? Why is there no movement? Outside the main gate, as Yang Qindong expected, Mu Bin was there. However, at this moment, there was a puzzled expression on his face. Just a moment ago, there were still waves of battle cries in his ears. But why was there no movement at this moment? There were three families in Yunnan Mansion. Among them, Qi Ningkang was responsible for attacking the back gate, Wang Shufu was responsible for attacking the side gate, and only Li Jiayin was left to accompany Mu Bin at the main gate. Suddenly, there was no movement at the main gate, and the head of the Li family was also puzzled. However, even King Shiping, Mu Bin, could not figure out why, so how could he figure it out? Many people were surprised by the silence at the main gate. At this time, the experienced veterans had already grasped the long saber or sword in their hands tightly. They had a feeling that there must be something strange going on. They were afraid that something had happened that they did not know. Just when everyone was still scratching their heads in confusion, Yang Qindong's figure finally appeared outside the main entrance. As soon as Yang Qindong appeared, more than a dozen arrows flew in front of him. Yang Chendong dodged most of them, but there were still 2 arrows stuck in his body. However, they were only stuck in his body. As Yang Chendong's body shook, the 2 arrows stuck in his bulletproof vest fell to the ground. At this moment, his face was also revealed in front of everyone. Bugnam of Gojoseon? Mu Bin's eyesight was very good, and he immediately recognized Yang Chendong's identity. The corner of his mouth opened, revealing 2 neat rows of teeth. Yang Chendong laughed and said, "You are King Mu Bin of Sheeping?" "That's me." Although Mu Bin's eyes were full of surprise, because he did not expect Yang Chendong to take the initiative to appear, and only one person, he was more excited. "This is Yang Chendong, the Bugnam of Gojoseon." Whether it is the Bai Ming Emperor or the Southern Ming Emperor, they both regarded him as a mortal danger. God knows how many times the 2 emperors thought about beheading this person in public, but they couldn't do it. And now, the opportunity has come to him. Doesn't this mean that his chance to make a great contribution has come? Men, capture him and reward him handsomely. In his excitement, Mu Bin naturally said. In fact, without him saying anything, the soldiers around him had already jumped out and rushed toward Yang Chendong, who was standing there alone. Go to hell. The muzzle of the heavy machine gun in his hand was raised, and there was a burst of gunshots. The more than 10 Mu family soldiers who rushed up were shot into sieves one by one, and they fell to the ground covered in blood. Even when they died, they couldn't close their eyes. The heavy machine gun's firing speed was too fast, and they didn't even have time to react. With a burst of gunshots, more than 10 people were killed. This scene also shocked the Mu family soldiers in front of the main gate. But they relied on the advantage of numbers and weren't too afraid. After all, Yang Chendong was only one person, and he only had one gun. Could he really kill hundreds of people present? Continue to go. If you can't catch him alive, then catch him dead. Mu Bin said as he took a few steps back. In this kind of dangerous situation, he wouldn't foolishly rush to the front. After receiving the order, the Mu family's troops on the left and right continued to rush forward. Even the dozens of guards led by Li Jiayin also rushed forward with a loud shout. But everyone knows that this is the time to make a great contribution. Even if it's a little risk of death, it seems to be worth it. Good. Yang Chendong's expression didn't change. On the contrary, his eyes lit up a little. He was worried that these people would turn around and run away. In that case, it would be difficult for him to make everyone stay with his strength alone. But if they want to rush up, that's what he wants. Tut tut tut, tut tut tut, the sound of heavy machine guns kept ringing. The rapid reloading that Yang Chendong had worked hard to practice now played a role. In less than a second, he could reload a new magazine. This gave people the feeling that his gun had an endless supply of ammunition. Wherever the muzzle of the gun was pointed at, soldiers fell one after another. In just a short 2 minutes, not only was no one able to hurt a single hair on Yang Chendong's body, but they also threw down more than 200 corpses. This result shocked everyone. Everyone used to only hear that Yang Xie's firearms were very powerful. But it was only very powerful. If they were really invincible in the world, then they would have already made a move on the great Ming dynasty. Why wait until now? In many people's view, Yang Xie's firearms should also have drawbacks, and as long as they relied on the advantage of numbers, it was still possible to make up for this shortcoming. In the end, everyone would be evenly matched. But now, when they saw the power of the firearms, they realized that they were too optimistic in the past. They were too ignorant. The power of the firearms was more than several times more powerful than they imagined. Seeing that so many soldiers had died in such a short period of time, Mu Bin's expression changed greatly. He was also a person who was used to seeing life and death. Over the years, he had fought countless big and small battles, but he had never seen such a powerful person. With his own strength, he had the combat power of a powerful army. Seeing that Yang Chendong still had a lot of ammunition on him, Mu Bin felt that things were not going to go well. His instincts kicked in again. He turned around and tried to escape from this place. A gentleman would not stand under a dangerous wall. Not everyone was like Yang Chendong, who was already the king and was willing to take the lead in everything. You want to escape at this time? Stay with me. Yang Chendong had been paying attention to Mu Bin all the time. This was his main target. If he let this person escape, wouldn't his appearance this time be imperfect? A smoke grenade appeared in his left hand. He held his breath and threw the smoke grenade with his left hand. Then, a second, third, and fourth smoke grenades appeared one after another. The front gate of the three provinces king, which was originally clearly visible, was soon surrounded by a cloud of smoke and dust. They could not see each other, and they could not see each other. It was especially chaotic. During this period, there were many violent coughs, which were stimulated by the smell of the smoke grenades. Yang Chendong, who had been holding his breath for a long time, was not affected at all. Instead, he turned his body again and quickly came behind Mu Bin, who was trying to escape. Then, he reached out his left hand and grabbed at Mu Bin's neck. Chapter 1594. Although he was running away, Mu Bin's five senses were still there. When he felt a strong wind coming from behind him, he instinctively shrank his neck. Then, he leaned sideways and grabbed the knife in his hand. Then, he turned around and slashed. Yang Chendong retracted his arm and dodged the fatal knife. He thought to himself, that was close. He had also become careless and began to pay more attention to Mu Bin. Since he could become the king of Shiping by the southern Ming emperor, he was obviously not an ordinary person. He could only blame everything for going too smoothly, which made Yang Chendong lose his vigilance. Fortunately, his agility saved him. No matter what, his opponent did not hurt him. Yang Chendong, who was no longer careless, was even more terrifying once he got serious. When he stretched out his left hand again, Yang Chendong moved faster and grabbed at Mu Bin for the second time. Save me. Mu Bin suddenly felt a sense of danger when he missed his target. The knife just now seemed to be a hasty attack, but in fact, he had been planning for a long time. He wanted to counterattack when someone suddenly attacked him. He had been training a lot, and his results were very good. However, such a sure-win knife did not work. He knew that Yang Chendong was difficult to deal with. Now, seeing that he was closing in on him again, other than continuously waving his blade, he was also shouting loudly. King of Shiping was indeed the king of Shiping, especially a king like him who had been guarding the territory. He had been practicing martial arts since he was young, so he was quite skilled. Yang Chendong did not manage to catch him twice. He only managed to grab the saber at his waist and forcefully snatched it away. And it was at this time that several Mu family's bodyguards appeared in the surroundings. They were all veterans who had followed Mu Bin for hundreds of years, and each of them had extraordinary skills. Although they could not exert 100% of their strength because of the smoke bombs, they still rushed over when they heard the commotion. One by one, they rushed toward Yang Chendong desperately, just to give their king a chance to escape. Scram! Yang Chendong shouted. He swung the heavy machine gun as if it was an iron rod. This was also because everyone was too close to each other, so shooting was limited. But even if he doesn't use firearms, Yang Chendong is a grandmaster. Why would he be afraid of a few Mu family soldiers? The heavy machine gun abruptly turned into an iron rod and accurately smashed under the Mu family's bodyguards who were rushing over. One by one, they were sent flying back in the same way they had rushed over. They screamed miserably as they were sent flying. Yang Chendong took an elegant step, still approaching Mu Bin step by step. Even though there were a few bodyguards blocking the way, the distance between the two sides was less than 10 steps. At such a distance, Yang Chendong was still confident that he could capture Mu Bin alive. It was like a cat catching a mouse. One was chasing and the other was escaping. The distance between the two sides was quickly closing. Perhaps sensing that he couldn't run away, Mu Bin turned around fiercely and shouted, "I'm going to fight you to the death." Then, he bumped into Yang Chendong. He still underestimated Yang Chendong. His five senses were already extraordinary, As soon as Mu Bin turned around, Yang Qindong sensed it. Before Mu Bin rushed over, he turned his body to the side. Then, he stretched out his right foot and gently hooked it, hitting Mu Bin's leg. With a thud, Shiping King fell to the ground. He quickly moved forward and stretched out his right foot as fast as he could, stepping on Mu Bin's back. With a little force, Mu Bin could not get up. Then, Yang Qindong fired again with the heavy machine gun. More than a dozen Mu family soldiers who had just reacted and wanted to get closer fell. Gunshots rang out, and Shiping King was also stepped on. Yang Qindong easily obtained victory by fighting against hundreds of people by himself. Shiping King's capture put a lot of pressure on the others. At this moment, they wanted to make a move, but they had some scruples. However, if they did not make a move, they did not know what to do. They were all stunned on the spot. Let go of Shiping King. He is a king personally appointed by the Southern Ming Emperor. Are you trying to rebel? Seeing that they could not make a move, the head of the Li family, Li Jiayin, took the initiative to step forward. He stood on the moral high ground and criticized Yang Qindong, criticizing him. Son of a bitch. Yang Qindong did not even look at him. He gently hooked his right finger, and several bullets flew out from the muzzle. Each bullet hit Li Jiayin's body, leaving several bright red spots of blood. His body swayed again and again. Finally, Li Jiayin's arm swayed a few times in the air. Then, he fell to the ground with a thud, dead. The head of the Li family, one of the three major families in Yunnan Prefecture, was shot to death just like that. This scene shocked the others. They stood still and did not dare to move. That was the head of the Li family. In the eyes of many civilians and soldiers, he was definitely a high and mighty figure. But now, he was killed just because of a disagreement. Compared to that, they were nothing. After killing Li Jiayin, the others became well-behaved. Yang Qindong could finally breathe a sigh of relief. Yang Qindong was also a little tired after the massacre. After all, he was a human, not a god. Plus, with such heavy equipment on him, ordinary people would not be able to stand just running back and forth. Fortunately, he had a stronger physique than the others. Not long after, shouts came from behind him. Kill! Charge in and save the sixth young master. Following these shouts, a group of black cavalry rushed out from the main entrance. They were led by Ba Daojiang. Everyone's eyes were red, and each of them carried firearms. They looked like they had just walked out of a mountain of corpses and a sea of fire. Ba Daojiang only found out later that Yang Qindong was gone. Originally, he thought that he had gone to the telecommunications room. It was only when Director Wang Shan came to ask for instructions with a telegram from Yao Yingjun that Beta Persei found out that the young master was gone. There was no need for Ba Daojiang to explain what it meant for someone to disappear at this time. Ba Daojiang could imagine it. Previously, Yang Qindong had broken out alone and attracted the attention of the assassins. After that incident, Ba Daojiang blamed himself, thinking that he had not done his duty. Now that Yang Qindong had disappeared, one could imagine how anxious he was. After leaving the side entrance to Dao Shao and the back entrance to the other black cavalry, Ba Daojiang led hundreds of black cavalry to break out from the main entrance. Along the way, all he saw were the corpses of his enemies. He could imagine who had done it, so he was even more anxious. After all, Yang Qindong was only one person. If he discovered something unexpected, there would be no one to inform him. The more he thought about it, the more anxious he became. Ba Daojiang and the others charged faster and faster. Finally, they appeared at the main entrance and finally saw Yang Qindong. When they saw that the young master was safe and sound and that there was a person under his feet and that there were corpses all over the ground in front of the young master, Ba Daojiang heaved a sigh of relief. Then, he led the black cavalry straight to Yang Qindong. The black cavalry also charged out. Seeing that there was no chance to attack Yang Qindong, the other Mu family soldiers at the main entrance wanted to escape. However, at this moment, gunshots rang out again. This time, they did not hit their bodies. Instead, they hit the air. If you don't want to die, stay where you are. Otherwise, the gun doesn't have eyes. They had already seen the power of the firearms. Who would dare to escape? Previously, they had taken action because there was a glimmer of hope. Now that even their last hope was gone, everyone had lost their will to resist. All they wanted was to save their lives. When everyone stopped moving, the black cavalry held them down one by one and tied them together one by one. The overall situation was now settled. The shouts just now were getting closer and closer. Soon, Beta Persei took the lead and appeared in front of Yang Chendong. When he saw the scene in front of him, Beta Persei involuntarily knelt on the ground. His eyes were full of joy. After Shiping King led 10,000 troops into the city through the East City Gate and headed towards the Three Provinces Palace, Beta Persei was like a mad dog. He led 10,000 people and rushed towards the Three Provinces Palace. During this period, he also encountered people from the three great clans and the Mu family's army. However, Beta Persei bravely rushed forward as if he did not care about his life. Anyone who blocked his way was either killed or seriously injured. But even so, he was still anxious. Although he was full of confidence in Yang Chendong, he was still afraid of what might happen. After finally rushing over and seeing that Yang Chendong was fine, Beta Persei felt exhaustion fill his body. He knelt on the ground with a plop. "Go, help Beta Persei up." Seeing that this was caused by physical exhaustion, Yang Chendong hurriedly said to Badaojiang. Then, he lifted his foot and let the other black cavalry come forward and hold down Shiping King Mubin. While removing the heavy machine from his body, Yang Chendong walked in front of Beta Persei and asked, "How's the situation outside?" After taking a few deep breaths, Beta Persei recovered some of his physical strength. He hurriedly got up and replied, "There's no big problem outside. Jianghu and the others are watching over there. They can't rush in." The battle to defend the city was not the key now. The Mu family's army had diverted some of their forces to block the reinforcements. Shiping King had also personally rushed into the city. It seemed that the so-called siege was just a way to lure the tiger away from the mountain. Previously, when they had sufficient forces, they could not take down Yunnan Prefecture. Now that the forces were scattered, it was even more impossible to take down the city. Yang Chendong nodded after hearing this. At this time, Wang Shan ran out of the mansion and delivered the telegram sent by Yao Yingjun. "Tell Yao Yingjun to just defend and wait for reinforcements. He just needs to keep an eye on the people who set up the ambush and don't let them escape." Since Shiping King had been captured, Yang Chendong no longer had anything to worry about. He also knew that his opponent had used up all of his tricks. Even so, it did not matter whether the reinforcements arrived earlier or later. The calmer Yang Chendong's tone was, the better everyone's expression became. Since the sixth young master said that it would be fine, it must be fine. Chapter 1595. Yunnan Manor was truly Yang Chendong's blessed land. He had only stayed here for a few days, but he had already captured the king of three provinces, Zhu Huihua. Now, even the king of Shiping, Mu Bin, was also captured. One must know that it would be very difficult to capture these two kings if they were to go to war. Even if the enemy was crippled, they might not be able to capture these two kings. It had to be said that Yang Chendong was very successful as bait. With the capture of the king of Shiping, good news came one after another. Yang San, Tai Hu, and the others appeared one by one. They did not come empty-handed. They cooperated with Captain Dao Shao to eliminate the Mu army that was attacking the side and back doors of the Wang mansion. They also captured some captives, such as Qin Inkong and Wang Shufu, the Qin family's patriarch of the three great families of Yunnan Manor. They were also among the captives. With these people arrested, the Southern Cloud Manor finally calmed down. After learning that the fastest reinforcements would arrive at Yunnan Manor at night, Yang Chendong said to everyone, "It's time. Everyone, get ready to counterattack." It was time to counterattack. All the generals had excited expressions on their faces. These days, although their achievements were not small, if one looked carefully, they had always been passively taking a beating. They always had to wait for the other party to make the first move before they could react. This was not a good feeling, and it made everyone who was used to taking the initiative to attack very uncomfortable. Fortunately, this difficult time was about to pass. The main force of the 5-star army was about to arrive, and they could finally launch a counterattack without any scruples. Yunnan Manor began to get busy. Yang Xinjiang led Beta Persei, Yang San, Tai Hu, and the others to begin to formulate a counterattack plan. Outside the city, Lufji, who was still attacking the city, did not know what was happening inside the city. The West Gate, which was originally captured by the Mu army, had long been recaptured by the 5-star army. At this point, the news outside the city was completely cut off. Ravji was still leading his troops to attack the city. In order to protect Shiping King who was in the city, the forces attacking the city were very aggressive. In just 4 hours, they had launched several attacks and lost more than 8,000 generals. In addition, there were also countless casualties. Seeing that there were only about 10,000 soldiers left, Ravji's expression turned ugly. He looked at Wu Yingtu and asked, "General Wu, do you have any ideas?" "My ass." Wu Yingtu, who was in a very bad mood, said angrily. Even though he was the Miao King, Wu Yingtu had not been doing well all these years. Firstly, there were too few Miao people, especially the young ones. Unlike the Han people, where a new batch would be born very quickly after the first batch was killed, the Miao people had a very small population, so their growth cycle was naturally very long. In order to fight for more benefits for the Miao people, Wu Yingtu had brought all the young people in the tribe out, all for the sake of fighting for more benefits. This was the last of his strength in the Miao people. However, in this battle, 70% of his 10,000 brave Miao soldiers died. Now, there were only 3,000 Miao people left, and more than 1,000 of them were injured. This result made him very depressed. So what if they won this battle? With this small number of people, when they split the benefits later, what he would get would be next to nothing. The drastic reduction in strength made Miao Yingtu very unhappy. When he heard Rajiv ask him, it would be strange if he had a good attitude. Rajiv had no other choice. He had only asked, but he did not expect to hear such an answer. His expression was very ugly, alternating between red and white. In the end, he did not say anything and left. At this moment, in Rajiv's eyes, Miao Yingtu had already formed a concept, that was, a person who was not worth his time. "Men, get on a horse and contact young Master Mu. Ask for instructions on what to do next. Also, stop the siege for now." Rajiv was able to get to where he was today because he was a man with brains. After continuously attacking the city for more than 4 hours, not only did he fail to take down the city, he also suffered heavy losses. More importantly, he only had about 10,000 soldiers left. This made him have no choice but to consider his next step carefully. He even suspected that King Shiping did this on purpose, so that he could use the war to deplete his strength. If it was in the past, Rajiv would not be so anxious. He had the kingdom of Bangla as his backer. Without a source of soldiers, he could just recruit new ones. After a period of training, there would be an army that could fight. But now, even the king had surrendered. He no longer had a backer and a source of soldiers. In such a situation, every death meant one less person. He didn't know when he would be able to replenish his men. He had no choice but to think about it carefully. Also, why was there no movement in the city after more than 4 hours? Didn't King Shiping already arrange everything? Then what was all this about? He desperately wanted to know, so he arranged for someone to ask Mukong. Rajiv was not the only one who did not know that King Shiping had been captured by Yang Qindong. Even Mu Tsong did not know. At this moment, he was still in the forest, waiting for Yao Yingjun to appear. However, after the death of Jiang Wuqing and 5,000 cavalrymen, Yao Yingjun was clearly afraid and did not move forward. This was good too. Mu Tsong was also happy to have some peace. He was waiting for good news from Yunnan Manor. He was full of confidence in his father. What? Rajiv asked what to do next. What else can we do? Of course, we have to continue the siege. Tell him that the timing is not right, so my father did not make a move. That's why he has to go all out. If we don't attract the attention of the defenders, how can my father carry out his plan? Mu Tsong was resting against a tree when he was disturbed by the people sent by Lavajai. He immediately spoke with disdain. The men returned resentfully. When these words reached Rajiv's ears, he was stupefied. Then, he reflected on himself. Could it be that the siege was not successful, and King Shiping did not see the right opportunity to make a move? If that was the case, he would have to work hard to continue the siege. Rajiv made a decision, or rather, he could only obey his decision. He went to find Wu Yingtu again to discuss the siege. Unfortunately, he was directly rejected this time. He was so angry that he cursed as soon as he left the tent. Wu Yingtu, this general will definitely tell young Master Mu about what you did. Don't think about fighting for something good in the future. Humph! After the angry Rajiv returned to the main camp, he gathered 10,000 soldiers under his command and launched another fierce attack on Yunnan Manor's West Gate Tower. Compared to before, this attack was more ferocious. It was obvious that he wanted to use the army to suppress the city and create enough conditions for King Shiping to make a move. Rajiv, who thought he was doing the right thing, did not know that the 5-star army's real reinforcements were less than 10 li away from Yunnan Manor's south. The first reinforcements were known as the King of Cavalry, the world's first cavalry army. After receiving Yang Chendong's telegram, each soldier was equipped with 4 horses and galloped out of Mount Liang under the lead of Army Commander Tian Hu. Along the way, they did not enter the city but took a detour. When the black mass of cavalry passed by, the soldiers of the 3 provinces in each city closed their doors and did not come out. The might of this cavalry was so fierce that it gave people a feeling of invincibility from afar. It was already fortunate that they didn't attack their cities. Who would take the initiative to find trouble with them? Because there was no one to stop them, the world's first cavalry army moved faster and faster. Finally, after each of the riders had almost run 2 horses to death, they saw Yunnan Manor in the distance. At this time, Hu Helu, the commander of the army guards, came to Tian Hu with an urgent telegram. General, the 6th young master sent an urgent message. Stop. After stopping the horses, Tian Hu ordered the army to stop and rest for a quarter of an hour. Using this opportunity, the other commanders came to him to discuss the next step of the battle. When the telegram was opened, it contained Yang Chendong's latest instructions. After reading it carefully, Tian Hu laughed and said, "The 6th young master is indeed the 6th young master. Without us having to do anything, he has already captured the 3 provincial kings and the king of Shiping." Ha ha ha. That's true. Although they are all kings, how can they be a match for the 6th young master? The other commanders also laughed after hearing this. During the past few days of rushing, it was impossible for them not to be anxious. They were especially worried about the safety of the 6th young master. Their past experience told them that the 6th young master was very powerful and would be fine. However, they only had 500 black cavalry with them, and Yunnan Manor was the base camp of the 3 provincial kings. Anything could happen in the enemy's camp. If something happened to the 6th young master, the 5 commanders did not dare to imagine what would happen next. Before the 6th young master left, he had already decided that the eldest crown prince, Yang Bo, would take over his position. However, could a 10-year-old child really lead them? What if someone was not convinced? After all, the Yangxia was too big. It was so big that no country, force, or ethnic group could compare with it since ancient times. Would anyone have the confidence to let a 10-year-old child manage such a big country? At that time, it was possible that the huge Yang family would fall apart in an instant. If that was the case, where should they go from here? Even if they obeyed the young master's orders, they would have to fight with their former colleagues. In that case, the only thing that would be lost was the strength of the Yangxia. If that was the case, it would be very difficult for the Yangxia to develop in the future. In short, if something happened to Yang Chendong now, the consequences would be unimaginable. In order to avoid such a situation, they could only rush with all their might. At the same time, they prayed that the sixth young master would be fine. Chapter 1596. Now that they had received the latest telegram from Yang Chendong, they could finally breathe a sigh of relief. While they breathed a sigh of relief, they began to think about how to make a contribution. More importantly, they were thinking about how to deal with those who wanted to go against the sixth young master. Alright, everyone has read the contents of the telegram. Since that's the case, I've decided to split into two groups. The world's first cavalry army was less than 10 miles away, but Rajiv had no idea about that. Although he had heard about the arrival of the five-star army's main force from some sources, in his opinion, the reinforcements would not arrive so easily. They would have to pass through many cities in the three provinces to reach southern Cloud Prefecture from Liang Mountain. Therefore, he did not think that other than Yao Yingjuan's reinforcements, Bugnam of Gojoseon would arrive in such a short time. Now, he was wholeheartedly sending troops to attack the city. The attack was not going well. It was even a little tragic. Rajiv did not know that Shiping King had been captured. The surrendered soldiers and civilians in the city knew about it, so they could focus on defending the city without worrying about other changes. This boosted the morale of the soldiers defending the city. With the advantage of numbers, the counterattack was fierce. Rajiv was destined to meet a tough opponent. His excessive trust in Shiping King had also doomed Rajiv to a tragedy. Seeing that the soldiers attacking the city had suffered heavy losses, and soon, more than half of the 10,000 soldiers were killed, he still had no intention of stopping the attack. At this moment, he was like a gambler, putting all his treasures on the line, hoping for a miracle to happen. Would a miracle happen? Of course, it was impossible. Not only did Shiping King not show up, but a mighty cavalry team came from afar. They were wearing light green military uniforms and black armor. Each of them had 2 horses. While they were still far away, the battle cries could be heard. Is Shiping King here? The excited Rajiv raised his eyes and looked. He was very excited. No one answered him because the others did not know how King Shiping's army was dressed. However, someone in the crowd recognized him. He was King Miao, Wu Tu. In the past, when he followed Zhu Huichen, he had dealt with the Mu family army. Naturally, he knew what the other party was like. Let's not talk about whether or not they had that many cavalry troops. Just from their appearance alone, they didn't look like one at all. Instead, they looked like the legendary 5-star army's cavalry. It had long been rumored that the regular 5-star army wore military green uniforms. This was very different from the military uniforms that were either black, gray, or even yellow. Because of this, Wu Yingtuo's expression changed drastically. Not to mention, Wu Yingtuo had once fought with the 5-star army, but he had been defeated and fled. Could it be that the reinforcements from the 5-star army have really arrived? But how could they be so fast? Doubts arose in his heart, but he quickly suppressed them because he knew that this was not the time to be conflicted. It was the time to make a choice. If the reinforcements from the 5-star army really came, then they would not be a match for the enemy with their current strength. In fact, when the infantry faced the cavalry, the idea of survival instantly occupied the highest point. Then, his gaze fell on Rajiv. Perhaps his only chance of survival depended on this person. Wu Yingtuo was already having second thoughts. Rajiv did not know about this at all. He was still looking forward to the cavalry's arrival. Surround him. It's this Rajiv. He overestimated himself and wants to become an enemy of Bugnam of Gojoseon. Men, capture him. Kill anyone who resists. Since he had decided to live, Wu Yingtuo did not care about whether he was a comrade or not. He only knew that if he captured this person and presented him to the 5-star army, there might be a way to survive. Wu Yingtuo led 3,000 Miao soldiers and suddenly attacked, catching Rajiv off guard. Seeing that many of his soldiers were killed by the Miao soldiers, he was furious. He roared loudly, Wu Tu, are you trying to rebel? Can't you see that the king of Shiping is already here with his cavalry? What are you trying to do? Ha ha ha. Open your dog eyes and see clearly. How is that king of Shiping's cavalry? It's clearly the reinforcements from the 5-star army. Even now, do you still place your hopes on Mu Bin? Can't you see that he's trying to weaken our strength? It's hateful that you're so badly injured, but you still don't understand. I really don't know how you survived all these years. Facing Rajiv's questioning, Wu Tu was not afraid at all. Instead, he shouted and questioned Rajiv. Rajiv didn't care about making use of them anymore. He was more concerned about who the cavalry belonged to. When he heard Wu Tu say that it was the reinforcements from the 5-star army, his expression changed greatly. At this moment, he did not want to be entangled with Wu Tu and the Miao soldiers. He only wanted to escape as soon as possible. Escaping was more important. You still want to leave? Do you think you can leave? He knew that if he did not capture Rajiv, once the 5-star army caught up, he would not have a good ending. So how could he give up on his only hope of survival? Everyone, kill. Capture Rajiv alive and present him to the 5-star army. There will be a great reward. With a loud shout, Wu Tu took the lead and rushed forward with his ghost head blade. With a few slashes, he cut down several soldiers and got closer and closer to Rajiv. You're courting death. Seeing his soldiers being cut down one by one, Rajiv became anxious. He knew that if he did not kill Wu Tu, he would not be able to escape. He simply rushed over with his spear. Before the world's first cavalry army's 4th and 5th divisions arrived, the battle had already turned into a mess. The 4th Division commander Su De and the 5th Division commander Yu Zhong glanced at each other. They didn't have any intention of taking action. They just ordered the cavalry to surround the scene. In short, they couldn't let the enemy who wanted to deal with the 6th young master escape. The battle in the field was still ongoing. Because of the number of soldiers and the premeditated plan, the Miao army gradually gained the upper hand. At this time, Wu Tu was leading 6 of his soldiers to surround Rajiv. As expected of the great general of Banka, Rajiv's personal strength was not bad. In just a short while, no less than 6 or 7 Miao soldiers had died under his spear. However, even a tiger could not withstand a pack of wolves. After a long battle, Rajiv finally felt that his strength was running out. It was also at this time that Miao To's ghost head blade arrived and landed on the body of the spear. Under the powerful force, the spear flew out of Rajiv's hand. Without a weapon, Rajiv could only dodge left and right without any ability to counterattack. If he kept defending, he would definitely lose. After a few more rounds, Rajiv was careless and his left arm was chopped off. He immediately let out a blood-curdling scream as he lost his balance and fell to the ground. Then, a few Miao soldiers rushed over and pinned him to the ground, tying him up tightly. Rajiv was captured. Seeing that the situation was over, the soldiers under his command abandoned their weapons and surrendered. At this point, the situation was settled. Wu Tu quickly tidied up his clothes and came in front of the 2 division commanders Su De and Yu Zhong who were riding in front of the army. After a long bow, he opened his mouth and said, I am Wu Tu, the commander of the Miao army. Because I went astray, I became an accomplice of the 3 provincial kings. Now that I have turned over a new leaf, I am willing to surrender to Bugnam of Gojoseon. I have specially captured the great general of Banka, Rajiv, to show my sincerity. I hope the general can give me a way out. Thank you. Oh. Su De and Yu Zhong looked at each other after hearing this, then nodded and said, General Wu, we will remember what you have done, but now we still have to tie you up. As for how to deal with you, it will ultimately be decided by Bugnam of Gojoseon. Do you agree? I agree. Wu Tu gritted his teeth and said helplessly. He didn't know what his future would be like. Now he could only hope that Yang Chendong would remember his contributions and not kill him. Under the city walls of Yunnan Prefecture, the chaotic battle ended dramatically. Without waiting for the world's first cavalry army to make a move, tens of thousands of enemy troops had all surrendered. This made the surrendered soldiers and the people in the city cheered. Beta Persei, who was standing on the city tower, also waved his hand with joy and said, "Come on, open the city gate and welcome the army into the city." In the dense forest, Mu Tsong was still sleeping comfortably against a tree. In his dream, he saw his father capturing Yang Chendong and making a great contribution. This was where Mu Tsong's confidence in his father came from. After all, the Mu family had been operating in Yunnan Prefecture for a long time. In addition, they suddenly appeared and attacked. How could Bugnam of Gojoseon, who had just arrived for a few days, contend against them? As his son, he only needed to wait for Yunnan Prefecture to be taken down by his father, then he would return with the army. At that time, they would immediately contact the Southern Ming Army. With the support of the Southern Ming Army, how could a leaderless five-star army be a match? In his dream, Mu Tsong was already overjoyed. He even saw the Southern Ming Empire's reinforcements coming. It was a mighty and majestic cavalry. Their arrival caused the earth to tremble. It was truly awe-inspiring. Crown Prince, this is bad. Another cavalry unit is coming. Just when Mu Tsong was still dreaming, he suddenly heard such a voice. Then his shoulder was shaken and he became completely awake. What's going on? When he opened his eyes and saw General Azad shaking him, Mu Tsong still had a sleepy expression. "Prince, a large number of cavalry suddenly appeared behind us." Cavalry? Are the Southern Ming Army's reinforcements here? Mu Tsong was still in a dream and couldn't extricate himself. No, they are using the banner of the five-star army. Azad's face was pale and his body was trembling. What? Five-star army, that's impossible. Mu Tsong's first thought was disbelief, then he kept shaking his head. Behind them was Yunnan Prefecture. His father should have taken it down by now. Then how could there be five-star army's reinforcements coming from this direction? Chapter 1597. Regardless of whether he believed it or not, the truth was the truth. Behind them, there was indeed a large number of five-star army cavalry rushing over, causing an earthquake on the ground. At the north side of the forest, Yao Ingjun also rushed over with 15,000 infantrymen. They split into two sides and blocked off the forest. How is this possible? Mu Tsong's mouth was so wide open that a fist could be stuffed inside. His expression became somewhat sinister at this moment. The arrival of the five-star army cavalry was from the direction of Yunnan Manor. Did that mean that Yunnan Manor was also completely under their control? If that was the case, where was his royal father? Why didn't anyone inform him when such a big thing happened? Mu Tsong couldn't figure it out, but it wasn't a matter of whether he wanted to or not. The five-star army had already launched their attack. Facing enemies in the forest, they had a way to attack. For example, the simplest fire attack. Countless arrows fell like rain into the dense forest, and a raging fire began to burn. The Mu family troops who were hiding in the forest became even more chaotic. The soldiers were full of confidence before because the five-star army was finished and even Bugnam of Gojoseon might be captured. But now, the appearance of the five-star army's cavalry dispelled their thoughts and made them feel that their lives were in danger. The arrows fell and ignited the forest. The Mu family troops who had nowhere else to go could only charge out and fight to their deaths. Fight to the death. The two generals, Azad and Hak, decisively made a decision. They had fled all the way here. Now that they didn't even have a country, they didn't have much hope for the future. Now that they could die for a noble cause, they might as well fight to the death. But the two didn't notice that when they led their troops to attack, the savior in their eyes, young Master Mu Tsong, disappeared. On the official road, the forest on both sides was set ablaze. More and more Mu family troops rushed out from both sides of the road. Azad and Huk rushed out from the east side of the forest, while Luo Guan led his army and rushed out from the west side of the road. When the two armies joined together, there were nearly 20,000 men and horses charging towards the five-star army's cavalry. They didn't choose to attack Yao Yingjuan's troops because they didn't want to expose their backs to the cavalry. This would only accelerate their defeat. However, was it really a good choice to target the world's #1 cavalry army? It's good that you've come. I'm leaving. 1st Division Commander Temu had always been a valiant warrior who loved to lead the charge. When he saw the enemy charging at him, how could he be courteous? He immediately squeezed his horse's belly with his legs and led his 10,000 soldiers to charge forward. The first merit belongs to our 2nd Division. 2nd Division Lu Duo was unwilling to fall behind and rushed out. 3rd Division Commander Hu Bo also wasn't going to sit back and watch. He wanted to rush out as well, but Commander Tian who came in front of him. 3rd Division Commander, they are enough. Your division is in charge of guarding. Remember, no one is allowed to escape. If they want to make an enemy out of the 6th young master, they will have to pay the heaviest price. Oh. Although he was a bit unwilling, a military order was absolute. After Hu Bo agreed, he spread out the 10,000 cavalry soldiers of the 3 divisions and completely surrounded the 2 forests. No one was allowed to escape. Using infantry against cavalry was like using scissors while the other side used rocks. The result was mostly predetermined. There were also powerful infantry that could fight evenly with cavalry. However, infantry usually had the advantage of terrain and numbers, or they were proficient in battle formations and had more powerful weapons. Clearly, the Mu clan army didn't have the advantage. Therefore, when they had the same number of troops, using infantry against cavalry was no different from seeking death. Not to mention the world's #1 cavalry army, even if it was an ordinary cavalry, victory would be assured against 20,000 infantry. Moreover, the ones fighting were Temu, and the others. There was no possibility of failure. The result was that the moment the 2 sides met, before they even started fighting, under a dense rain of arrows, the Mu clan army at the front fell one after another. When the cavalry charged into the midst of the infantry, heads flew all over the ground. One by one, the Mu clan infantry were cut down, blood spilling everywhere. This was a battle where the strength was completely unequal. The infantry didn't have any formation to speak of. They were completely relying on brute force to attack. Facing the world's #1 cavalry army's cavalry, they were only sending themselves to their deaths. The cavalry quickly passed through the Mu clan infantry. A quarter of the 20,000 men were gone. Then, there was a recoil, division, and countless arrow formations formed, constantly killing. The ground was covered with more and more Mu clan soldiers' corpses. By the time Yao Yingjun arrived at the battlefield with his army, all he saw were broken limbs, blood splattered all over the ground, and heads rolling down. General Yao, I'll leave the task of cleaning up the battlefield to you, he. Riding on his horse, Commander Temu showed Yao Yingjun his row of white teeth, then urged his horse to leave with the army. The world's #1 cavalry army had their own pride. As long as there were infantry, they would never interfere with work like cleaning up the battlefield. Yao Yingjun cupped his fists and thanked Temu, as he watched the cavalry leave. It must be known that although cleaning up the battlefield was tiring, there were many benefits. Not only could they get a share of the military merits, but they could also get all the good things from the enemy corpses. Just this point alone was enough to make many people envious. It only took them more than 2 hours to kill the enemy, but they still hadn't finished cleaning up the battlefield even when the sky turned dark. The army had no choice but to rest and wait for the next day to start cleaning up. Tian, who left the 3rd Division's commander, Hu Bo, to cooperate with Yao Yingjun while he led the army to Yunnan Manor not far away. In Yunnan Manor, peace had already been restored. The 5-star army's main reinforcements had arrived. Naturally, there was no need for the surrendered soldiers and ordinary citizens to defend the city. They could all return home to reunite with their families. For a moment, many sounds of joy and laughter could be heard from the various courtyards. Of course, there were also some people who died in battle. As their families, they naturally couldn't be happy. Fortunately, the 5-star army's compensation was generous enough. Although it didn't satisfy everyone, most people still accepted this form of compensation. After all, if they didn't follow the 5-star army, but followed the 3 provinces' kings or king sheeping instead, it would be impossible for them to receive these benefits even if they died. This battle also made the citizens fully aware of the value of peace. People died in war. Who knew how many families were torn apart because of it? This was something that couldn't be bought with money. The 3 provinces' palace was also very lively at this time. The reinforcements had arrived. Beta Persei, Yang San, and the others finally didn't have to worry so much. They finally had a chance to have a good meal and then sleep. Tian, who also brought the 1st Division and 2nd Division into the city. He personally went to the 3 provinces' palace to see Yang Qindong. 6th young master. The moment he saw Yang Qindong, Tian who couldn't help but cry. Without knowing the secret of Yang Qindong's possession, none of the high-ranking officers felt at ease this time. Okay, a man bleeds but not tears. Don't cry. Yang Qindong personally got up and helped Tian Hu up. 6th young master, your actions this time were too risky. But some people are too hateful. They actually want to deal with you. In this matter, the Southern Ming dynasty must be secretly supporting them. Do you think we should send troops to Nanjing? Please rest assured, 6th young master, my world's 1st cavalry army is willing to be the vanguard. After the greeting, Tian Hu took the initiative to ask for a battle. With the current strength of the world's 1st cavalry army, these words could be said and done. Yang Qindong knew this, but he decisively shook his head. Tian Hu, this young master can understand your feelings, but now is not the time to do this. The Southern Ming dynasty is full of Han people. It would be best if it can be accepted peacefully. Accepted peacefully? Is there such a possibility? Tian Hu asked with some doubts. The process is of course tortuous, but this young master already has an idea. You don't have to worry. Yang Qindong once again showed a confident smile. In the Southern Ming dynasty, he had already played a big game of chess. If the other party agreed, it would be fine. If they didn't agree, then he would be doomed. Nanning Prefecture. As the capital of Guangxi Province, the general's mansion in Nanning Prefecture was also brightly lit. The general of Guangxi Province, Bai Kuan, was currently sitting cross-legged. Although this was his mansion, there was still a hint of nervousness on his face. Opposite Bai Kuan was a scholar in a long robe. This person's appearance was not ordinary, and he looked very kind. If it wasn't for the arrogance that flashed in the corner of his eyes from time to time, he would have given people a better impression. The scholar in the long robe reached out and took a sip of the tea. He frowned slightly. Obviously, the rough tea leaves made him somewhat unhappy. However, when he thought of his mission, he didn't say anything about this matter. On the contrary, he said against his will, "Good tea. Assistant Minister Zhou is too polite. How can a martial artist like me know what good tea is? As long as you are happy, I will be happy." He constantly paid attention to the actions of the man in the long robe. Some flattering words came out of his mouth. He really had to be polite. This Assistant Minister Zhou was the left Assistant Minister of the Southern Ming Dynasty's Ministry of Rights, Zhou Ziong. It was said that he was deeply favored by the emperor. For a martial artist like him, it was usually impossible to invite him to sit together. Now that he finally had the opportunity to sit together, of course, he would try his best to please him. Chapter 1598. Not to mention, Bai Kuan was also a criminal. Who told him to be a subordinate of the 3 provinces' king, Zhu Huiyun? The commoners didn't know, but how could he not know? The Southern Ming imperial court didn't have any impression of the 3 provinces' king. If it wasn't for the fact that they needed to use this barrier to block the 5-star army, they would have already dealt with him. Now that Bugnam of Gojoseon and the 3 provinces' king were fighting, no matter who won or lost, the Southern Ming imperial court didn't need to make a move. This was a great thing. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Zhou Xiang suddenly appeared and represented Zhu Qizhen in recruiting Bai Kuan. Zhu Qizhen was the emperor of the Great Ming Dynasty, and Bai Kuan was just a martial artist. How could he not agree? How could he dare to disagree? This led to the scene where the two of them sat together. Now that everyone was seated together, Zhou Xiang was obviously the leader. Whatever he said, Bai Kuan obeyed. This was also a general's respect for the imperial power and his desire for power. Considering the Great Ming Dynasty's emphasis on literature and suppression of military power, military officials had never had a high social status. Many military officials even had to lower their heads to civil officials to ensure their position. They needed to find a backer. Bai Kuan simply treated Zhou Xiang as a backer and respected him. Speaking of which, Bai Kuan had only been a chiliarch in the past. It was only because Zhu Huixin had taken a liking to him that Bai Kuan had promoted him and given him the authority to command the entire Guangxi army. That was how he had gained his current reputation. Zhou Xiang looked down on such a rootless person from the bottom of his heart. If it wasn't for the fact that he still needed Bai Kuan, he wouldn't even look at him. However, Guangxi's position was very important now. It replaced the original Yunnan manor and became Bugnam of Gojoseon's border. This also caused Bai Kuan's status to rise, which was why Zhou Xiang lowered himself to come here. However, no matter what, the tradition of scholars looking down on martial artists was still there. As for Bai Kuan's flattery, Zhou Xiang thought that everything was normal. Zhou Xiang pretended to be very enthusiastic and said to Bai Kuan, "General Bai, this time, the emperor is very optimistic about you." After knowing that General Bai has abandoned the dark side and joined the light side, he was very happy. He even handed over the military power of Guangxi to you. You can't let the emperor down. Yes, yes. This general thanks His Majesty for his benevolence, but this lowly one knows that this was all because of Assistant Minister Zhou, so this lowly one is even more grateful. When you leave in a while, I have a small gift to send you off. Bai Kuan said humbly, as if giving Zhou Xiang a gift was a great job. Ha ha ha. Seeing how sensible Bai Kuan was, Zhou Xiang chuckled. General Bai is too polite. It would be impolite for this old man to refuse. In fact, we are all working for His Majesty, so it is only right that we work hard. Yes, it is only right that we work for His Majesty. Bai Kuan repeated these words. Oh, that's right. General Bai, I don't know if you've thought about it, but no matter who wins or loses this battle, there will be people coming to look for you very soon. I wonder how you will deal with them. Zhou Xiang joked as he brought the topic back to business. Bai Kuan was very clear that this was a test for him. He had asked himself this question before. At this moment, he did not hesitate to answer. Is there even a need to ask? I, Bai Kuan, am a man of Southern Ming. Even if I die, I will be a ghost of Southern Ming. Whether it is the 3 provincial kings or Bugnam of Gojoseon, they are nothing. If they dare to come, they will definitely hit a wall. Our Guangxi prefecture's 50,000 soldiers are not to be trifled with. Huh, good. General Bai is very bold. Come, let this assistant minister toast you with tea. This result was very pleasing to Zhou Xiang's ears. Naturally, his mood was very good. This general doesn't dare. This general is the one toasting you. Bai Kuan smiled, revealing a row of teeth as he raised the teacup in his hand. The two looked at each other and drank. After putting down the teacup, Zhou Xiang chuckled. Actually, things might not be that bad. Although Bugnam of Gojoseon is powerful, he has already entered Yunnan Prefecture and is a turtle in a jar. Perhaps the 3 provincial kings have already taken him down. Furthermore, we still have Shiping King in Yunnan. He will keep an eye on that place. Nothing will happen. Even if someone wants to harm Guangxi, this assistant minister has already spoken to the Guangdong political commissioner, Yang Xian. When the time comes, the Guanghai Guard will send reinforcements. At that time, with the geographical advantage, no one will be able to gain any advantage. Yes, yes, everything will be according to Sir Zhou's arrangements. Sir Zhou, this general is toasting you. Please have some tea. Bai Kuan nodded. He had the backing of the Southern Ming dynasty, so he was not afraid of anyone coming to find trouble with him. If anyone came, he would use all his strength to kick them out. At that time, he would be able to obtain military merits. One wanted to curry favor, while the other wanted to appease people. The atmosphere was getting better and better. About an hour later, Zhou Xiang left in satisfaction. Of course, before he left, someone had already handed him a 5,000 taels banknote. This made his smile even brighter. However, this brilliance did not last for long. After just one night, when Zhou Xiang woke up again, a servant placed the contents of the letter he had just received in front of him. When he read the contents, Zhou Xiang, who originally had a slight urge to pee, no longer had the urge to do so. He became extremely clear-headed. It says that the 3 provincial kings and Shiping king were captured by Wu Nanwu. Is this true? It can't be a mistake, right? Holding the letter, he asked the person who had delivered the letter with a look of disbelief. The messenger could feel Zhou Xiang's anger, so at this moment, he only knelt on the ground and did not even dare to raise his head. Zhou Xiang knew that the contents could not be wrong, but he did not dare to believe it. Didn't they say that Bugnam of Gojoseon was arrogant and only brought 500 people into Yunnan Manor? The 3 provincial kings had prepared tens of thousands of soldiers and were waiting for the other party to fall into their trap. How did Zhu Huihua get captured? How did this trick work? There was also Shiping King Mubin. He was at the periphery of Yunnan Manor and should have acted according to the situation. If things went south, he could still escape if he could not win. How did he get captured? What exactly happened in the middle of all this? Zhou Xiang could not figure it out. Looking at the trembling messenger kneeling on the ground, he said, "Send a messenger pigeon to the Southern Cloud Manor's embroidered uniform guards. Ask them what happened and how it ended up like this. Report back to me after you figure it out." Finally, he could leave. The messenger in charge of the messenger pigeon quickly nodded and was about to leave. "Wait, this matter cannot be publicized now. If the news is leaked, I will take your life." Thinking that once the news was out, it might cause panic, so Zhou Xiang decided to suppress this matter first. "I understand." The messenger nodded in agreement and finally left, leaving Zhou Xiang alone to sit there and think. After a long time, he sighed. Things changed so quickly that it was somewhat unbelievable. Zhou Xiang could not help but think that the situation in Guangxi seemed to be a bit dangerous. Guangxi was indeed in danger. Zhu Huihua was the king of 3 provinces. This time, Yang Chendong only brought 500 black cavalry and rushed into Yunnan Manor because Zhu Huihua promised that as long as he came, he would hand over the power of the 3 provinces. Although Zhu Huihua had broken his promise, Yang Chendong still kept his promise. Of course, now was the time to take back the power of the 3 provinces. It was just Guangxi. It was impossible to say that Yang Chendong valued it. Currently, Yangtze's territory was rich and populous, so Guangxi province was not a big deal. However, if he wanted to swallow the entire Great Ming, Guangxi was the only way. In addition, he was justified this time. How could he let go of such a good opportunity? First, he met Yao Yingjun and learned that Guizhou had changed sides and voluntarily joined Yangtze. Now that Yunnan was under his feet, and even Shiping's Wang Mubin was captured by him, it was time to solve the problem of Guangxi. Jiang Wuqing died a heroic death. Generous compensation. His family will be rewarded with land. If his children are of appropriate age, they can be sent to the Yang clan school in Suxian City to study. Yao Yingjuan's loyalty is commendable. His personal ability is outstanding. Drafting the military affairs of Guizhou and Yunnan. When there is a suitable candidate in the future, he will be replaced. If the soldiers who follow Jiang Daqing are willing to join the 5-star army, they can pass the examination. Those who are not willing to join the army and are willing to follow the people will be given land. Captives must be protected. After paying money, they can also serve the people. Those who can't find a protector will have to serve the Xianxia according to their rank. When the time is up, they will be sent to other Xianxia provinces. They can also enjoy the respect of the Han people. In this battle, the surrendered generals will be judged according to their performance. Those who have performed meritorious deeds can be reduced to commoners. Those who do not change will be sentenced to death or 3 to 30 years of reform through labor. Orders came out of Yang Qindong's mouth. The chaos in Yunnan Prefecture was quickly being dealt with. At the same time, the food and other necessities from the other provinces were quickly distributed to Yunnan and Guizhou. This was to ensure that the people here had clothes to wear, food to eat, money to earn, money to spend, and things to buy. After all, this was the land of the Han people. Yang Qindong gave the people here sufficient respect. Not only did he not force them to move, but he also redistributed land and property to ensure that everyone had land to farm and things to do. Of course, the policy of relocation still had to be announced. Although Yangxia's territory was large enough, the number of Han people was still too small. This caused the influence of the Han people to be unable to reach the level that Yang Qindong wanted. Chapter 1599. If the millions of people in the two provinces were willing to migrate, it would greatly increase the number of Han people in the other Yangxia provinces. It would also allow Han culture to spread to other foreign races faster, allowing the custom of Han people being respected to continue. Since they wanted the remaining people to have land to farm, where would the land come from? They would need to take advantage of the rich, which were the nobles and gentry. If there was no suitable reason before, the assassination of Yang Qindong by the 3 great clans of Yunnan was the best reason. For example, the deceased head of the Li clan, Li Jiayin, all of his assets were confiscated immediately. According to the statistics, Li Jiayin's family alone occupied thousands of hectares of fertile land, silver, and all kinds of goods, and shops amounted to 12 million taels of silver. When this harvest was reported to Yang Qindong, it gave him a fright. He had expected Li Jiayin to be rich, but he did not expect him to be so rich. Unfortunately, it was not desirable to hide wealth among the people. Those who were truly rich were misers. They only had themselves in their hearts, and they were even willing to betray their country and people for benefits. It was like the 8 great merchants of Shaanxi in the late Ming dynasty. They earned money from the Ming dynasty's government and the people, but in the end, they funded the enemy. It was because of this that a small slave had occupied all of China's rivers and mountains. Thinking about it, wasn't the last emperor of the Ming dynasty, Chongzhen, defeated because he had no money and no pay? The funny thing was that an emperor needed to borrow money from his officials, but in the end, there was no one he could borrow money from. He did not know how many good words he said, but in the end, he persuaded his father-in-law to lend him 30,000 taels of silver. It seemed like he had dug out his heart and cut his flesh. But in reality, when the roaming king entered the capital, he actually plundered more than 6 million taels of silver from the emperor's father-in-law's house. With so much money, the emperor only borrowed 1/20th of the money and cried to the heavens and the earth. In the end, he lost both his life and wealth. Presumably, when he was killed by the roaming king, he regretted it, right? No. Not necessarily. Some people were like this. They would not shed tears until they saw the coffin, and even if they saw the coffin, they would not shed tears. They regarded money as more important than the sky, even more important than their own lives. She really didn't know how such people's brains were developed and what they were thinking. Having said that, even if Yang Qindong knew that there was such a thing, he would never allow the same thing to happen in his Yang family, especially under his nose. For this reason, he had formulated a series of rules when Yangxia was developing. For example, Yangxia encouraged business, but the business tax was very heavy, reaching 7 out of 10. In other words, the merchants of Yangxia had to pay a tax of 700 coins every time they made a profit. After deducting the expenses, only about 50 coins would fall into the hands of the merchants. By doing this, not only did it prevent some merchants from rising up, but it also filled the Yangtze's treasury. Also, Yangtze merchants were not allowed to be officials, not even within the 5 blessings. Once discovered, he would definitely be severely punished. At the very least, they would be stripped of their position and fined silver. At the very least, it would be possible for their entire family to be exterminated. Since ancient times, collusion between officials and merchants had always been a big problem, but it was unavoidable. Yang Chendong had set such a rule when he first created the rules. It was to prevent people from becoming too powerful under him. In the end, his descendants would also be under the control of others. Yang Chendong would never allow his descendants to borrow money from his officials one day. That would be too shameful, and it would be too much of a failure. Speaking of which, the matter of the Li family made Yang Chendong see the drawbacks of the great Ming dynasty. At the same time, he also began to deal with these people. For this reason, he specially formulated some rules for these officials and villagers. For example, ordinary people had the right to choose whether or not to migrate, or where to migrate to. However, these people did not have this right. Not only did they have to leave their homeland, but they also had to go to a place designated by Yangtze. Whether they liked it or not, they had to do so. Otherwise, the soldiers of the 5-star army would teach them a lesson. Also, before migrating, they had to conduct an in-depth investigation. For example, what kind of person were they? Did they oppress the people? Did they have a murder case? If there was, then sorry, they would be punished according to how they should be punished. If they were involved in a criminal case, they would be sentenced according to how they should be sentenced. If they caused deep resentment, they would be beheaded. When this policy was announced, it really scared a lot of people. In particular, the 2 families, Qin Inkong and Wang Shufu, were taken to the largest square in Yunnan Manor. A public denunciation meeting was held, allowing the people who had suffered from their sufferings to complain. The scene could really be described as earth-shattering, and it could even make ghosts weep. This was because all the people in the city who heard the news came. The feeling of being able to see the usually high and mighty dignitaries bow their heads in front of them was really too good. The grievance meeting and the complaint meeting were held for a day. Later, it was confirmed that Qin Inkong was guilty of the most heinous crimes. He colluded with the government to rob people of their land, occupied real estate, and even killed 56 people. When the evidence was presented one by one, Beta Persei announced on behalf of Yang Chendong that he would be executed on the spot, and his head would be chopped off in the square. As for the other members of the Qin family, they were also sentenced for their crimes. Some were beheaded, and some were sentenced to 3 to 30 years in prison. This really shocked a lot of people. When they saw that Bugnam of Gojoseon was serious, the people cheered, while the dignitaries were pale. Those villagers who were usually good people were better off. At the very least, those who had a habit of deceiving the common people directly fainted. The people ran around to spread the news. They had taken revenge, and they were finally the masters. The next day, it was Wang Shufu's Wang family's turn. In contrast, Wang Shufu was usually reasonable. At least, he had not personally killed anyone. There were a few bastards in his family who were found to have been sentenced to a corresponding term after being found out. As for him, he was returned home without any charges. Only 90% of his family's property was confiscated, and he was allowed to take the remaining 10% and move to other provinces designated by Yangtze. This combination of punches was really just rewards and punishments. Seeing that the Wang family was fine, some people were relieved. At this point, the dignitaries that had troubled the great Ming dynasty for many years were easily dealt with by Yang Chendong. This was because Yang Chendong was ruthless enough. In addition, he was the founder and had the power that no one could restrict, so he dared to do this. If his son wanted to do this, it would be very difficult. However, once the news spread, it would inevitably lead to conflicts between the dignitaries and the dignitaries of other provinces. When Yao Yingjun told this to Yang Chendong, he chuckled and said, "It's fine. We didn't intend to reason with them anyway. As long as they enter my Yangtze, they will either follow my rules or seek their own deaths." There is no third choice. Don't worry, they know what to choose. Yang Chendong had this confidence. Facts also proved that in the Han territory occupied by the Yang family in the future, although the dignitaries and squires there offset each other in every way, in the end, they did not form a climate and threat. In the end, from opposition to compromise, and then to the habit of following. This proved that as long as one was ruthless, there was no problem that could not be solved. The most important thing was whether one dared to be ruthless and whether they could carry it out. After dealing with the matters of the Qin and Wang clans, Yang Chendong handed these trivial matters over to Yao Yingjun. Yao Yingjun had authority and an army. With Yao Yingjun's ability, dealing with these matters was a piece of cake. On the other hand, Yang Chendong's thoughts were on the matter of conquering the Guangxi province. The Intelligence Bureau had already sent a secret report that the Guangxi general, Bai Kuan, had already contacted the Southern Ming dynasty and changed sides. Yang Chendong was not surprised at all by this result. Although in terms of strength, Yang Xia was far above the Great Ming dynasty, in terms of influence, the Han territories still belonged to the Great Ming dynasty. Unless Yang Chendong carried out a bloody massacre in the land of Wuxia like he did to other alien races, he still needed to rely on the breath of Wuxia. Unless it was absolutely necessary, Yang Chendong did not want to use the methods he used to deal with the outlanders in the Great Ming dynasty. As such, he would most likely come into contact with negotiations or economic blockades. Speaking of economic blockades, Yang Chendong had already prepared a method. Over the years, in order to maintain the relationship with the Southern Ming dynasty, Yang Xia had sold large amounts of food to the Southern Ming dynasty at a low price. Sometimes, it was even cheaper than what he sold. Many times, Yang Xia would even sell food to the Southern Ming dynasty at a loss in order to let the Southern Ming dynasty develop a habit of trusting him. In the past 10 years, the results were quite good. At the very least, from the Intelligence Bureau's investigation, there were very few people who actually grew food in the Southern Ming dynasty. It was not profitable at all. It was better to buy the food than to grow it yourself. What would you choose? The direct result was that there was a large amount of uncultivated land in the Southern Ming dynasty. Many of the originally fertile lands were covered with weeds that were half the height of a person. Because of this, the Southern Ming dynasty wanted to manage the land and had tried before. However, they found that after investing a lot of manpower and resources, the final results were not very good. When they even lost money, no one had any ideas about the land. There was no profit. In the current Southern Ming dynasty, at least 9.5 out of 10 pieces of land were uncultivated. At this time, if the food supply to the Southern Ming dynasty was suddenly cut off, one could imagine what kind of effect it would have. Of course, the Southern Ming dynasty was also full of talents. They seemed to be afraid that this problem would affect the imperial court, so they built a granary in advance and filled it with food. It was said that it was enough to feed the entire Southern Ming dynasty for 2 years. In other words, once Yang Xia cut off their food supply, they would have 2 years to deal with it. In this way, the problem could be solved. However, since Yang Chendong was prepared to use the food supply issue to threaten the Southern Ming dynasty, how could they not have any methods? Chapter 1600. Was it a granary? Did they store a lot of food? Was it enough to last them for 2 years? Were they not afraid of Yang Xia's threats anymore? That was simple, just burn it. Speaking of which, what Yang Xia did not lack the least was food. Not every place had a climate suitable for large and small factories, and not every place could start light and heavy industries. However, most places could be used for farming. With the current vastness of the Yang family's territory, the number of fields had long reached an astonishing level. With the addition of the steam engine, transportation would become even more convenient. The problem of transporting food had been solved, and the transfer of food from the north to the south would not be as laborious as before. Under these conditions, food would not be a problem to stifle the development of the 5-star army. Moreover, because of Yang Xia's policy of never increasing taxes on land, there were still many farmers. As long as there was enough money, it would be very convenient to reclaim the land. If they were pushed too far, they would burn all the food. This was Yang Qindong's method of dealing with the southern Ming dynasty. Although it was a bit violent and direct, the results would be very good. Of course, this was the last resort. What he needed to do now was to negotiate. At the very least, he needed to make his stance clear. Just like how he appeared in Yunnan Manor with 500 black knights and dragon guards, wasn't such a risk also for the sake of righteousness and justice? Yang Qindong was also clear about taking back Guangxi. This was what the three provinces' king, Zhu Huixing, had promised him. Now that he was sending troops to Guangxi, no one could say anything. Another 5 days had passed, and the situation in Yunnan Manor had stabilized again. Yao Yingjun had a stick in one hand and candy in the other. He had subdued those who opposed him, and even roped in a group of dignitaries and country gentry who supported him. After consulting with Yang Qindong, Yao Yingjun stated that as long as these people cooperated well with the work, they could take away 20% of the wealth when they left their homeland. Seeing that the general trend was changing, more and more of the so-called local tyrants began to support Yao Yingjun and Yang Qindong's reform. Once the matters in Southern Cloud Prefecture were sorted out, all they needed to do was to copy the gourd and draw a ladle, and then extend it to other prefectures. Yunnan Manor no longer had any major problems. Various reinforcements had also entered Yunnan Manor during this period of time. It was time for Yang Qindong to consider the matter of invading Guangxi. Before he could make a move, and before he could think of which main force to bring, news came that the Southern Ming Empire had already sent an envoy that was 10 miles away from the Southern Cloud Prefecture. A messenger came to report that Bugnam of Gojoseon was to personally go out of the city to welcome the envoy. Yang Qindong was a little surprised that the Southern Ming envoy had arrived first. In his opinion, now that he had won a great victory, the other party should be afraid and should be defending to the death. How could there be someone who had the courage to take the initiative to meet him? Yang Qindong ignored the fact that he had to go out of the city to welcome them. To exaggerate, with his current status, even if the Southern Ming Emperor, Zhu Qizhen, came personally, he could say that he didn't want to welcome them. What could others do about it? Ba Daojiang, go take a look. Yang Qindong didn't send out Beta Persei. In his opinion, Ba Daojiang's level was enough to deal with a Southern Ming envoy. Yes. Ba Daojiang, who received the order, immediately cupped his fists and agreed. Then, he ordered 100 black cavalry and left the prince's mansion. Here, with the arrival of various reinforcements, Captain Xiu Vi also rushed to Southern Cloud Prefecture with 1,500 black cavalry and took over the security of the prince's mansion. Outside Southern Cloud Prefecture, Southern Ming Empire's left Assistant Minister of Rights, Zhou Ziong, was sitting in a soft sedan with his head raised. Although it was a soft sedan, the days of hurrying on the road had tormented him. This could be seen from his pale face. He was just a scholar. Usually, there were people to serve him when he wore clothes in the mansion. Now that he had to travel such a long distance, how could he not be tired? But now, all the tiredness had been put to the back of his mind. He was more concerned about whether the person he sent to act as the vanguard had entered Yunnan Manor, whether he had met Yang Qindong, and whether he had spoken of his request. The so-called letting Yang Qindong personally come out to welcome them was actually Zhou Ziong's idea. This time, Zhou Ziong was appointed by the imperial court to deal with the problem of the three provinces. But since it was an imperial order, how could he dare to disobey? That was why he wanted to test him. He wanted to see how much respect this Bugnam of Gojoseon had for the Southern Ming Empire. This would determine his attitude. As a member of the civil officials group, Zhou Ziong had his own pride, but he was not stupid. He was very clear about what could be done and what could not be done. The process of waiting had always felt long. Zhou Ziong sat in the sedan and waited for 4 hours. But these were the hottest 4 hours of the day. He had been waiting since noon until now. He felt as if his whole body was about to be oiled. Zhou Ziong, whose throat was about to smoke from the sun, could not help but curse in his heart. He thought that Yang Chendong deliberately did this to express his sincerity. He had already traveled 5 miles. At this moment, he was only 5 miles away from Southern Cloud Prefecture. With such a short distance, he did not believe that the welcoming team had not arrived after such a long time. There was only one possibility. Yang Chendong was deliberately basking in the sun. When he thought of this, Zhou Ziang's face turned ugly. He had a strong feeling that this mission would not be so easy to complete. It might even be impossible to complete. Finally, after Zhou Ziang did not know how many times he cursed in his heart, a group of cavalry finally came from afar. From afar, there were not many people, but the group was unusually orderly. It actually gave off a faint sense of oppression. Zhou Ziang finally could not help but curse. This was indeed unbecoming of a scholar, but if it was anyone else, they would not be able to help but curse when they saw that the welcoming team was moving slower than a snail. Yes, the team from afar was indeed moving very slowly. Ba Daojiang, who was at the front, rode on a horse and deliberately slowed down. He had been by Yang Chendong's side for more than 10 years. Although he did not completely understand the 6th young master, he could sometimes understand the meaning behind his gaze. Since the Southern Ming Empire's envoy was so arrogant, Ba Daojiang would make them uncomfortable. What, do you really think that our 6th young master is someone you can order around? Even if Zhu Qizhen was here, he would not dare to be so arrogant. Since that was the case, Ba Daojiang was naturally going to have some fun. He purposely slowed down his speed so that the emissary and the others could enjoy the scorching sun. This was just a small matter. He still had some big moves that he had yet to use. The team slowly moved forward and finally arrived in front of the envoy's team. At this moment, Zhou Ziang was no longer angry. Now, he just wanted to enter the Southern Cloud Manor and have a good rest. What? Bugnam of Gojoseon did not come? Although he had already expected that Yang Chendong would not be in the welcoming team, as the envoy of the Southern Ming Empire, he still wanted to save face. Therefore, he still pretended to ask this question. Bugnam of Gojoseon is busy with something important. Envoy, are you entering the city? Ba Daojiang did not explain much and replied with a very arrogant attitude. Zhou Ziang was not stupid. Of course, he understood the hidden meaning in this sentence. It was saying that the matter he was here for was insignificant. Thinking that he was the envoy of the Southern Ming Empire and did not need to lower himself to the level of a nameless person, he coldly snorted and pulled the curtain. Let's go. Enter the city. Enter the city. There were close to 1,000 people in the envoy team. They were also exposed to the scorching sun and had been impatient for a long time. Now that they could finally enter the city, their faces were filled with joy. They hurriedly agreed and raised their placards, struck their gongs, and beat their drums. It seemed to be quite a show of force. Hee hee. Ba Daojiang sneered in his heart when he saw that the 1,000 people were still acting like this. Then, he also turned his horse around. However, only those who were very close to him noticed that Ba Daojiang, who had turned his head, had a trace of a malicious smile on his face. Giddy up, giddy up. The black cavalry began to move. They were moving slowly just a moment ago, but this time, they began to speed up. As the war horses galloped, the yellow sand on the official road flew up like a gust of wind and drifted towards the 1,000 people of the envoy team. The yellow sand that came out of nowhere hit the entourage of the envoys, causing them to cough violently and curse loudly. Why are you so slow? Hurry up, follow our team. After waiting for the yellow sand to fall to the ground, the 100 black cavalry suddenly galloped back. After Ba Daojiang greeted them, the war horses continued to gallop, causing the yellow sand to fly up again. Anyone who was not a fool could see that the other party was doing this intentionally. Think about it, how could they be faster than the light cavalry while carrying so many things while walking? As they went back and forth, many of the entourage of the envoy team were covered in sand. Some of them even had sand in their eyes. However, they were still carrying things in their hands and could not put them down. They could only endure it as they walked. Tears flowed down their cheeks uncontrollably. Nay! As if to show off his superb horsemanship, Ba Daojiang rode back again. The war horse raised its front hooves and kicked up a huge amount of sand. Then, it suddenly landed, kicking up a huge amount of dust. Ba Daojiang was not the only one who did this. The 100 black cavalry behind him did the same. In this way, the southern Ming officials in the envoy team looked as if they had crawled out of yellow mud. A casual shake could cause half a caddy of yellow sand to fall off. They looked as pathetic as they could. Chapter 1601. Hurry up and keep up with our speed. It was the same sentence that the senior had said. Soon after, Ba Daojiang once again spurred his horse forward, stirring up sand and dust. What's going on? Zhou Ziang, who was sitting in the palanquin, did not know what was happening outside. He only felt that the procession was moving and stopping, so he lifted the curtain. It was this action that allowed countless yellow sand to enter the palanquin, causing Zhou Ziang, who was unprepared, to sneeze. Achoo, what is this? What's going on? He continuously fanned himself with his right hand until the black cavalry moved a little further away. Finally, the scene in front of him became clear. Then, Zhou Ziang saw a group of people covered in yellow sand in front of him. Ah! Seeing that the originally neat group had become like this, Zhou Ziang instinctively wanted to reprimand them. This group represented the image of the southern Ming Empire. How could they behave like this? What would others think if they saw this? However, as soon as he opened his mouth, a gust of sand hit his face and was sucked into his mouth. He immediately choked and shut his mouth. At this moment, he only felt that his mouth was full of sand. How could he have the time to reprimand others? Let's go quickly. It was unknown who shouted first in the group, but the others only hesitated for a moment before increasing their speed. Since there was sand and dust everywhere, it was better to walk faster. This way, they would suffer less. First, they walked quickly. In the end, they unknowingly started running. Even so, the sand and dust still hit their bodies. It could be said that they were in an extremely sorry state. At the east gate of Southern Cloud Manor, the commoners who had heard the news had already run over to watch. It seemed to be human nature to watch a show. When Yang Chendong entered the city, they came out to watch. Now that they knew that the group of envoys from the Southern Ming Empire had arrived, they also came out to watch. Speaking of which, although Southern Cloud Manor was the territory of the Southern Ming Empire and had always considered itself a citizen of the Southern Ming Empire, ever since Zhu Huichen was conferred the title of King of 3 provinces, they rarely heard any news about the Southern Ming Empire. Zhu Huichen wasn't a very capable person, but his ambition wasn't small. In order to change the views of the commoners, he forbade his subordinates from talking about the Southern Ming dynasty. Now that he was captured alive, this ban was naturally lifted. When these commoners found out that there was a show to watch, more and more people gathered. Hey, don't you guys think that the Southern Ming Imperial Court's envoy delegation is very impressive? A trusting commoner in the crowd asked. Of course. A young man who looked like a scholar said arrogantly. He had studied Confucianism for more than 10 years, and some of his ideas had long been deeply ingrained. Such a person yearned for the imperial examinations of the Great Ming Dynasty and dreamed that one day he would be nominated for the imperial examinations. If that happened, he would really be able to bring glory to his ancestors and become a person above others. The scholar proudly added, "How could you illiterate elders understand the might of the Southern Ming Imperial Court? Do you know the majesty of the emperor in the throne room? You should know that the Great Ming Dynasty values face the most. This time, the Great Ming Dynasty has sent a diplomatic mission. Of course, they will be very awe-inspiring. At that time, you will definitely be surprised. Is that true? Will they be even more impressive than the black cavalry that Bugnam of Gojoseon brought into the city?" A commoner in the crowd clearly didn't believe it and asked. Of course. Their might is not something that you can imagine. Although Bugnam of Gojoseon's Guard of Honor is not bad, compared to the Southern Ming imperial courts, it is still far from enough. The scholar was still full of arrogance, but he wasn't stupid. He didn't dare to say anything that was unfavorable to Yang Chendong. Speaking of which, these scholars who studied Confucianism didn't have a good impression of Yang Chendong. All of this was because if one wanted to become an official in the Yangxia imperial court, one needed to have true knowledge. It wasn't enough to just say a few words or write a beautiful essay. That would only work if he had the goods in his stomach. The best way was to apply for the Yangxia imperial court and wait for graduation before being allocated. For scholars who had studied Confucianism for more than 10 years, this method was no different from learning it all over again. Who knew how much time would be wasted? So how could they be interested in Yang Chendong? It was only because Yang Chendong was too powerful. He even killed 2 of the 3 great clans of Southern Cloud Prefecture. This battle formation really scared some people. They were unconvinced, but they didn't dare to say it out loud. When the commoners heard the scholar's words, they became even more curious. They wanted to see how impressive the so-called Southern Ming imperial court's envoy was. After seeing it, they could boast to their friends and relatives. Inside the city gate, the number of commoners increased. After some of the scholars' exaggeration, everyone's curiosity towards the envoys grew. Some people even began to imagine how heroic and domineering the so-called Southern Ming imperial court's envoy would be. "They're here, they're here." A person with good eyesight in the crowd shouted loudly. This seemed to be an order from the general. With this shout, everyone's attention was drawn to the city gate. Then, under everyone's gaze, the 100 black cavalry took the lead and moved out. Wow! A group of black cavalry, indeed impressive. Bullshit. Just as someone opened his mouth, he was immediately criticized by others. Open your eyes and take a look. That's Bugnam of Gojoseon's black cavalry. They must have gone out of the city to welcome the envoy. After this explanation, the person who shouted previously had an awkward expression. Fortunately, at this moment, another person spoke. "Look, the Southern Ming imperial court's envoy is here." That person really couldn't continue talking about how they were. Because the domineering and awe-inspiring Southern Ming imperial court didn't appear. Instead, a group of people with dusty faces and disheveled clothes suddenly appeared. It was as if they had lost a battle and had no formation. Following behind the black cavalry was indeed the Southern Ming imperial court's envoy. Originally, they were still very dignified. But first, they were baptized by dust and sand. Then, they ran for a while. Each of them was covered in sweat. Some people couldn't take it anymore and simply unbuttoned their clothes. Only then did they feel cooler. Because of this, from afar, they didn't look like an envoy at all. On the contrary, they were in an extremely sorry state. To put it bluntly, they weren't much better than the fleeing commoners. This is the awe-inspiring and domineering Southern Ming imperial court's envoy? In the crowd, there were commoners who couldn't help but ask. That's right, I can't see how impressive they are. They aren't much better than us commoners. That's right. That's right, who was the one who said that the Southern Ming imperial court's envoy represents the face of the Southern Ming imperial court and is very mighty? The commoners were all talking one after another. At this moment, the scholars in the crowd had already lowered their heads with a look of shame. If there was a crack in the ground right now, they would have directly burrowed into it. The commoners were stunned. It was obvious that the appearance of the Southern Ming imperial court's envoy this time was very unsuccessful. It could even be described as a failure. Zhou Ziang, who was in the sedan, wasn't much better. He had just spat out the dust in his mouth, but there was still sand floating on his face. It could be said that he was in an extremely sorry state. He also knew that now that they had entered the city, according to his previous intention, the procession had to stop. Then, he would get down from the sedan and give a speech. In order to gain everyone's support, he had already obtained the imperial decree, and that was to announce that the scholars from Yunnan and Guizhou could go to Nanjing City at any time to take the exam. Because of Zhu Huihua, they would even receive a certain amount of preferential treatment. Zhou Xiang believed that once these words were spoken, he would quickly obtain the support of these scholars. As a result, Yang Chendong's position in the Southern Cloud Manor would be greatly shaken. At that time, he wouldn't be in the mood to think about solving the problem of Guangxi, and that would be the best time for him to negotiate. But all of this was disrupted by Ba Daojiang's welcoming ceremony. Right now, he absolutely couldn't get down from the sedan. Otherwise, wouldn't it be a disgrace? With no intention of getting down from the sedan, the envoy group quickly followed behind the 100 black cavalry. The other members of the envoy group also lowered their heads as much as they could. Clearly, they also knew that their current image was not good and it was best not to see people. Ba Daojiang rode on his horse and looked at the reactions of the commoners and the envoy group. He nodded in satisfaction. Then, he took the lead and led Zhou Xiang to the relay station in the city. In order to accommodate the 1,000 people of the envoy group, the surrounding courtyards of the relay station were cleared. It was enough to accommodate them. Seeing that many 5-star army soldiers were leaving the clean courtyards, Ba Daojiang cupped his hands and said to Zhou Xiang, "This is the relay station. You must be tired from the long journey, so rest for now." "Right, the security in the city isn't too good right now, so it's best if you don't go out. Otherwise, if something happens, no one will be responsible." Ha ha ha. After saying this, without waiting for Zhou Xiang to ask anything, Ba Daojiang spurred his horse and led the black cavalry into the distance. Zhou Xiang opened his mouth, but in the end, he had no choice but to swallow the words he wanted to say back into his stomach. Originally, Zhou Xiang wanted to ask when he would be able to see Bugnam of Gojoseon, but after thinking about it, since he was already here, why would he be afraid of not being able to see Bugnam of Gojoseon? Thus, he decided to take a good rest first. The most important thing was to wash up properly. Speaking of which, his body was currently covered in sand and dust, which was very uncomfortable. After leaving the relay station, Ba Daojiang returned to the 3 provinces' king's mansion and reported to Yang Chendong. You did well. Have the other matters been arranged?" Yang Chendong had already heard about Ba Daojiang's actions. When he thought of the southern Ming Kingdom's envoy group's disheveled appearance, he couldn't help but feel a burst of laughter. "Young master, everything has been arranged. Some of the veterans disguised as commoners are strolling outside the relay station. As long as these people dare to come out, they will definitely be taught a lesson." Ba Daojiang chuckled. Those veterans were masters who killed without batting an eyelid. If the Southern Ming Kingdom's envoy group really didn't listen, then a few people would really die. You're tuning in to the Carefree Valley YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.